Let's settle down. We are starting. Let's settle down. Tio, let's settle down. All right, welcome to day 3 of the Future of Energy Conference 2024. We are happy that you've been able to join us on the last and final day, and the attendance is very encouraging. Today is going to be a much shorter day than the previous 2 days. And like I promised and advertised yesterday, today you have an early lunch. So I'll run you through the events for the day. We're going to have guest speeches this morning from very distinguished personalities. Then we'll move to our plenary panel that is going to discuss issues from minerals to clean energy. How do we build integrated value chain in Africa? And then we'll have our side events. Today we have only one side event session that is supposed to end at 1:30, and then we have lunch at 1:30. So the program has changed. We'll have lunch at 1:30, and then we'll come back here for the closing plenary. There will be a panel, and then we do the final edition of the Innovation Challenge, where the final 3 would compete among themselves for the final prize. So today we'll start off by having a recap of yesterday. But before that, I've seen that people are posting pictures and writing things. Please do tag us on Facebook, Africa Center for Energy Policy, on Twitter, on X at ASEP Power, and on LinkedIn, Africa Center for Energy Policy, using the hashtag FEC2024, right? So I hope that today we'll be trending on all the socials using the hashtags, because I've been seeing your pictures, but I've not been seeing the hashtags. I hope we'll do well. Let's clap for ourselves that would tag ASEP. Please, let's invite Dr. Charles Ofori, who is the policy lead for climate change and the energy transition at ASEP, to give us a recap of what we've been doing this far. Please, he's coming. The rule still stands. Until he gets here, we'll keep clapping.
Good morning once again, and thank you very much, Kojo. So this is just a recap of what happened yesterday. Yesterday, the opening sessions emphasized that 3.2 million deaths are attributed to household air pollution. And also, despite the stark energy poverty that Africa has in terms of climate financing, the statistics from 2010 to 2020 showed that Africa received only 2.4% of global renewable energy investment, including high debt-to-GDP ratios, regulatory barriers, and poor sector coordination continue to hinder progress on climate finance. To address this finance gap, the Minister of Finance for Ghana called for collaboration across civil society, private sector, and government to create effective strategies and policies that are supported by strong leadership. He also stressed the importance of innovative financing methods such as carbon markets, debt for climate swaps, and maximizing oil and gas resources to avoid stranded assets. There was discussed a 3-pronged approach during the panel session to unlock climate financing. First, reforming the global financial architecture is essential to address various biases against African economies, particularly the disproportionately high cost of credit. the $7.2 trillion currently spent on fossil fuels could be redirected to close the climate finance gap. Second, improving financial partnerships among multilateral agencies and funders through a structured energy pact is critical to combating energy poverty in Africa. Third, developing financial mechanisms to channel funds from the global north, where they are abundant, to the global south, where they are most needed, is very vital. In the discussions, we also noted that Ghana has also made some strides in developing a carbon market to offer some lessons for other countries in Africa. And even though Ghana's climate actions are largely dependent on securing donor grants, the country is leveraging carbon finance to address these energy access gaps. The success of carbon markets, as discussed in Africa, hinges on ensuring investor confidence through stronger relations and institutional frameworks with the potential to learn from advanced countries like Switzerland. However, political instability and corruption continue to pose significant risk to investor confidence in Africa's climate financing. During the side events, we had a discussion around methane, which is the second largest greenhouse gas after CO2, contributing to global warming. And in addressing this, the side session for Ghana saw the development of Ghana's Methane Roadmap Action Plan, which is the MRAP, which involves a structured process, engaging with stakeholders, conducting analytical work and sectoral consultations, and drafting the MRAP itself. It also involved collaboration with the National Development Planning Commission, and also ensure proper integration into the national planning process. Data from the MRAP was sourced from the NDC tracking template, which have been in use for about 2 years, providing detailed insights into actions, financing, and data requirements. On clean cooking side events, it showed the growing market for ethanol, supported by government incentives and investment from carbon financing. The session also provided a lot of insights into Kenya's ethanol production, where local supply has yet to meet demand, which leads to the need for significant imports to address the gap. It showed the need to increase local production of ethanol and improve the sustainability of same as a clean cooking fuel. Further conversations also touched on the geopolitical and then economic complexities within African countries, often becoming net importers of petroleum products due to global pricing dynamics. And this was the side event on the future of oil and gas. And these pricing dynamics are influenced by entities like OPEC and then Russia. The discussions showed and revealed that Africa must avoid geopolitical alignments and foster regional partnerships to strengthen Africa's energy market position. Additionally, best practices for cleaner energy systems within the oil and gas sector, such as transitioning to natural gas and implementing methane management, were greatly highlighted. Further discussions also highlighted the environmental degradation caused by poor extraction practices and the lack of consultation with local communities in development projects. And there's the need to ensure extensive consultations to ensure that energy transition does not lead to job losses and economic displacements in these communities. We completed that with the Innovation Challenge, which also saw 6 contestants showing various designs and innovations as far as the energy sector is concerned. And we closed with lunch. Thank you very much, and we hope you have a wonderful time.
Good morning, everybody. It's exciting to see all of you on day 3 of the Future of Energy Conference 2024. I think you deserve a round of applause, a resounding one. Yes. You stayed with us from day one, from Monday to Wednesday, and we really do appreciate your presence, your views, your perspective, and the invaluable contributions you are making to shape the future of Africa's energy. This morning, we are graced with the presence of our esteemed guest, and he is in the person of the Chief Executive Officer of Ghana Chamber of Mines, founding member of the Steering Committee of Ghana's Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. He is the Executive Director of ECOWAS Federation of Chamber of Mines, and he serves on the Governing Council of the University of Mines and Technology. He's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing UK, a chemical engineer by profession, and an entrepreneur. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome no other person than Dr. Suleiman Nukone, the Chief Executive Officer of Ghana Chamber of Mines. Please keep the applause coming. He's been very generous with his time for us. Let's appreciate him. Thank you so much.
Good morning to all of us. Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this very important conference. Before I start, I really want to thank the African Center for Energy Policy for inviting me, and also recognize the presence of my dear friend, Dr. Maritz, head of AMDC, African Minerals Development Center, and all others who have made this conference possible. The topic for discussion is very dear to my heart. Very, very important for the development of our continent. We all know what energy does. In fact, in the usual lexicon, they say a prime mover. Effectively, nothing moves without energy. And therefore, it is important for us to have these conversations to help our continent, as the youth will say, to the next level. It looks like we have everything in place. We have the resources, we have the men, we have the men, we have the men. We have the mineral resources, we have the various energy resources. How do we pull all of this together to support our continent to get to the next level? I believe you'll agree with me that energy drives everything, and more so energy security. Competitively priced energy produced in accord with ESG considerations is even more crucial for socioeconomic development. No doubt, Africa is reputed to have huge potential for growth and development. A recent UNIDO World Bank research underscored the importance of access to energy to the growth and development of Africa. Energy can make a difference between life and death, between a prosperous nation and expanding opportunity and one where people struggle with poverty and vulnerability. It has been estimated by development economists that electricity can increase household per capita income by a whopping 39%. Therefore, to industrialize and provide basic energy for the majority of people living off the grid and in rural areas, we don't have a choice. We need to make sure they have electricity in the minimum. Ladies and gentlemen, most countries in south of the Sahara face a major challenge in pursuing their development and social obligations because of inadequate modern energy sources. The range of beneficiaries of access to affordable and competitively priced power are quite broad. Farmers will have improved yields, better storage of their produce, as well as improved livelihoods and well-being of households. Businesses will no doubt operate at a higher productivity whilst households' livelihoods are improved, especially their education and health outcomes. The access to electricity, most of them in sub-Saharan Africa. The World Bank has also stated that there are about 1.3 billion people without reliable power sources globally, majority of whom are in Africa and Asia. This is equivalent to about 600 million people, which is about 70% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa, without electricity. This paucity of electricity access adversely affects the powering of water supplies, telecommunication services, and improving healthcare delivery. No doubt, access to affordable power spurs economic growth in sub-Saharan areas, in suburban areas, and creates more jobs and new industries, in addition to the enhancement of children's education and healthcare. So the real question is this: how can Africa innovatively address this energy access deficit to catalyze its economic growth and development? African countries need to identify and assess their energy sources. There's thermal, geothermal, energy minerals, as well as renewable energy sources such as hydro, geothermal, wind, and solar. But how do we do this assessment? That is a key challenge, especially in the energy minerals space, where I actually function on a regular basis. It's about doing the exploration and identifying these ore bodies and bringing them to market. Unfortunately for Africa, we appear to have left this space for investments coming from outside the shores of Africa. I think that we need to have a rethink. Yes, we all know that exploration, as the name says, is risky, because there's no guarantee at all that if you should do the exploration, you make a commercial find. However, it has to be done by someone before we get our energy minerals, when we are talking about the just transition. So who has to do it? And when we allow others to do exploration for us, and they make the commercial finds, what it means is that they would have an advantage at the table. So I think it's important that as part of this conversation about the just transition and all of that, how excited we are. Yes, Africa has lots of these minerals, from cobalt, from lithium, that range of minerals. The critical question is who brings them to market? That has to be addressed. Again, we need to consider Africa as a unit as envisaged under the African Continental Free Trade Area and identify these energy resources, how these energy resources could be shared among countries in Africa. In the first instance, consider regional energy markets such as envisaged under the West African Power Pool. We don't have a choice but to integrate and work collaboratively. Within West Africa, we know about the West Africa Power Pool. It may not be operating efficiently, but at least we have the systems in place. It's a model which needs to be expanded across the continent, such that we need and we should be able to share the resources that we have. Not every country is bestowed with the same level of endowment. And therefore, through harnessing the relationships we have, having established transnational transmission networks among countries and sub-regional countries, this should help us to share the resources that we have been endowed with. At the same time, given where we are, the R&D around critical minerals, around energy minerals, we need to be at the bleeding edge of innovation and technology by entering into strategic partnerships among laboratories, academics, and research institutions in Africa with counterpart leading R&D institutes globally. Identify capacity gaps in human capital by country and arrange cross-fertilization of knowledge and skills. As VRA assisted the public power generating utility in Liberia a few years ago. Furthermore, it will be apt to organize seminars and conferences like this among policymakers and technocrats in the energy space in Africa to promote networking and sharing of knowledge and skills. It's a model which needs to be replicated across Africa. For over 15 years, our brothers and sisters in Liberia suffered an unfortunate civil war. Monrovia, the capital, was practically in darkness. It took the intervention of the presidents of the two countries, Ghana and Liberia, for our own VRA to go and support them to make sure that they have light. Reading the reports, there were doubters that this could be achieved. But VRA was able to pull this together. And this has to be actually replicated across the continent. The ultimate challenge is how to bring to production or generation the energy resources as identified in this environment, which frowns on investment in fossil fuel-based resources such as petroleum and coal in the global drive to net zero and decarbonization. It is well known that concerns about the harmful effects of greenhouse gases and their impact on climate change has decimated the financing options for development of fossil-based energy resources, especially coal. However, Africa is blessed with significant amounts of petroleum resources which the continent cannot leave stranded. So even as we are speaking about the future of energy, what are we going to do with what we have? That is a critical challenge. I surmise that it will be one of the things we must have discussed at this conference. Therefore means that Africa has to explore innovative ways of encouraging exploration and development of its petroleum and other fossil-based resources. This may include engaging Africa-focused development finance institutions such as the African Development Bank. However, given the rather high risk of exploration and relatively risk-averse nature of these finance houses, it may be apt to negotiate with blue-chip international oil companies in terms that encourage them to invest in Africa's petroleum resources without necessarily racing to the bottom. On energy minerals, it will be worth having a rethink about how to promote investing in exploration. I mentioned that earlier on. It's something the Chamber of Mines is quite particular about. With the several years of mining experience in Africa, we need to endeavor to raise mining capital for exploration from within Africa. Raising funding from local stock exchanges, as well as leveraging local pension funds to finance mining projects, especially exploration, needs serious consideration. We need to put our money where our mouth is. The resources belong to us. However, in their natural state, they don't go to the market. Like I said, we don't need to leave that space for other investors to come and explore. Even as we invite them to come, we need to have in parallel our own entrepreneurs investing in exploration. While the need for safeguards to prevent ethical issues such as the BRICS scandal in the 1990s in Canada, whilst at it, the African Union Commission recently adored the African Minerals and Energy Resource Classification and Management System, the Pan-African Resource Reporting Code, in March 2024. This Africa Code is for classification of minerals and energy resources, also called PAC, which will rival JOC of Australia, SAMPREC of South Africa, and NI 43101 of Canada. It is therefore a major building block for Africa to certify the resource and reserve estimation work on the continent. Effectively, some good work is being done by the African Union, making sure that we also own the space of exploration and certifying the exploration work and the resource estimation work that is being done for us, which is a plus and a positive for our continent. It is widely acknowledged that mineral resources and petroleum resources are often found in outlandish areas which are generally quite distant from habitation. Therefore, discovering these resources and bringing them to production presents an enormous opportunity to accelerate the development of communities along the corridors or the right-of-way. For example, the national grid will ordinarily take decades to be extended to far-flung communities. However, given that mineral resources require significant amounts of energy to extract and process, the extension of the national grid to the mines presents opportunities for communities in their corridors to benefit from access to electricity. A similar opportunity beckons for the planned transmission of natural gas to Europe from Nigeria. Energy-deficient countries along the corridor through metering stations and agreements could obtain their requirements of natural gas off these transmission lines. While the global drive for decarbonization and net zero appear to be a threat for Africa's fossil fuel-based resources, the high solar intensity on the continent, along with its clean reputation, provides opportunities that the continent can leverage to enhance its energy access to catalyze development. Furthermore, the major raw materials, including silica sand, graphite, chromium, bauxite, vanadium, copper, lithium, tellurium, required for constructing solar panels and ancillaries such as batteries for a booming solar industry, are obtainable on the continent. These should be exciting times for Africa's energy-based development. However, to take advantage of these opportunities, Africa needs to implement policies to encourage investment on the continent. Favorable investment policies should include customs duty exemption for imported components, VAT exemption for after-service installation, as well as a net metering system pledged at an attractive rate that allows off-grid generators of power to sell their excess generated power to the grid to recoup part of their investment. This should free much-needed space on the grid to serve industry. Given the huge capital outlay required for constructing, wheeling, and transmitting power across countries, which could be extensive for most grids, it would make sense to pursue off-grid solutions for unserved and underserved communities. Evidence abounds that Africa's off-grid solar continues to heighten the interest of investors, given its accelerated growth in recent years. Households lead the way in investing in cleaner energy alternatives to grid power, even as the continent confronts its energy access constraints. Further, the solar sector is a priority for both social and regular investors. Among others, the alternative, that is the cost of grid power, even if it should be wheeled to far-flung communities, will be at quite pricey tariffs, which makes investment in off-grid solar, both an investment and social impact perspective, extremely attractive, besides the positioning benefits that off-grid solar has gained globally. D-Light, a well-known provider of household solar products and affordable finance, recently closed a new securitization facility to scale up its pay-go consumer finance offering to make solar-powered products available in low-income communities. According to a Bird Story agency, African Frontier Capital, a social impact-focused asset management company, provided the $176 million financing deal, which will be deployed to expand the company's services in Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, recent data shows a massive interest in the sector from global financiers, with off-grid power making up to 25% of startup investments in Africa in the year 2023. By way of innovative financing, clearly, securitization appears to be a major funding vehicle, drawing funding from banks and institutional investors. The overall investment opportunity or need is expected to be in the region of about $300 million, including power for agriculture, health, enterprise, and higher energy services. The two institutions recently announced ambitions to support the private sector to rapidly expand access to 300 million people, with significant new regional and country-led programs coming online. The World Bank has committed to work to connect 250 million people to electricity through distributed renewable energy systems or the distribution grid, while the African Development Bank Group will support an additional 50 million people. Deploying innovative financing vehicles, including securitization, will be a credible way of bridging the energy access gap in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, traditionally, the mining industry is acknowledged as a very energy-intensive, and in some instances, it is a sine qua non for the exploitation and processing of ore to valuable products. Whilst traditional mining operations, especially surface mining, consumes heavy amounts of diesel for earth-moving equipment, Underground mines are generally known to be intense consumers of power. In recent times, and in response to energy transition to net zero, some earth-moving equipment are being powered by alternatives to fossil fuel. In South Africa, for example, Anglo-American recently launched its fuel cell-powered dump trucks, leveraging the country's vast palladium resources. This required the collaboration of the mining firm and OEMs to create the world's largest hydrogen electric mining vehicle. This is deemed to be innovation-driven approach to sustainable mining, bringing together technology and digitization. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, there's so much going on in Africa. There's really so much going on in Africa. What is required of us to succeed as a continent in improving access to electricity is for us to work together. We need to leverage the African Continental Free Trade Area, which envisages that the African continent will develop leveraging the regional blocks, whether it is SADC, whether it is ECOWAS, or the others. How do we work together to make sure that we leverage the various advantages that each country has within each of the regional blocks? That is what we need to do. And I'm sure that once we're able to do that and leverage whatever competencies and skills that we have on the continent, we should be able to improve access to energy, especially in the wake of the just transition. The mining industry, as you can see, is at the nexus of this just transition from our globe, which we deem to be quite polluted, and what we envisage we should have as a globe or as a people. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity, and we're looking forward to further conversations on this important matter. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kone is still taking his seat, so let's give him another hand. Thank you so much, Dr. Kone. You couldn't have set the context better for today's panel discussion. The fact that the mineral resources in their raw state cannot be on the market, and therefore it is time for us as Africans to begin to think about the value chain additions. And the need also to promote investment in our exploration sector, not forgetting initiatives that would drive our local entrepreneurs to participate in the mineral sector. Thank you very much, Dr. Kone, and that is what today's session is all about, promoting local content in the mineral value chain, mineral to clean energy transition technologies value chain. So we will quickly move on to our second guest speaker, but before that, I want to quickly acknowledge our partners. Many thanks to the Ford Foundation. A big thank you to Oxfam. Please, we can give them a clap. It's for their support that we are all gathered here today. We also want to say a big thank you to the NRGI. Thank you so much, and all our partners for making this event successful. We also need to appreciate our online participants. They've been with us from day one till now. Thank you so much. And before I forget, I would want to encourage our moderator for today to try to rope them into the discussion. So our second guest speaker is no other person than one woman I've come to know, appreciate, and love so much in the recent years. She has extensive experience in the extractive industry, having served as Chief Technical Advisor on extractive industries for sustainable development at the UNDP Mozambique, as a lead economist, leading the mineral portfolio in UNECA, COMESA, the AFDB, and the US Institute of World Affairs, Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, with a resounding applause, help me welcome the Interim Director for African Minerals Development Center, Dr. Marit Kittel. Please, let's keep clapping all the way from Addis Ababa. Thank you so much, Dr. Marit Kittel.
Thank you so much, Mabel. You make me sound like I'm royalty, which is good. It's really a pleasure to be amongst all of you here. And I was telling colleagues that these kinds of conferences are the ones that give me energy. And this is energy, and it's so fitting. Because the real discussions are here, not at that level of African Union or because we discuss real issues and practical issues, so I really take some energy from this. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, first I would really like to thank the African Center for Energy Policy for having invited the African Minerals Development Center in this important gathering. In Ghana, in Accra, we are currently appreciating the warm hospitality of the wonderful people of Ghana. This gathering is very important as it focuses on harnessing Africa's resources while fueling innovation for equitable energy access. A topic that is not only vital for the future of Africa, but also for the world. As we gather here, it is essential to recognize that energy is the lifeblood of modern civilization. It powers our homes, fuels our industries, and drives economic growth. Yet, in Africa, the continent rests with abundant mineral resources. The lack of access to reliable and affordable energy remains a significant challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, drastic shifts are currently occurring in the world that will have significant impact on the energy transition, climate change, wars, and other factors that are reshaping the geopolitical structure of the world. These shifts, though compounded with risk and uncertainties, provide opportunities for Africa, especially as the continent is endowed with the strategic green minerals the world needs for the energy transition and green industries, including for solar panels, wind turbines, and energy storage systems, such as the lithium-ion batteries. Of global reserves, Africa hosts 6% of copper, 53% of cobalt, 25% bauxite, 21% of graphite, 46% of manganese, 35% of chromite, 79% of phosphate rock, 91% of platinum group metals. I'm giving the numbers because we really want to show you that we have what it takes. Beyond reserves, Africa is accounting for an even greater share of current production of many of these minerals, including a commanding 70% of cobalt. Out of the 20 critical quote-unquote minerals, Africa is in the top 3 producer countries of chromium, cobalt, manganese, phosphates, and titanium. It should be noted that Africa's relatively low level of exploration would suggest that it should rise in reserve rankings when it attracts more exploration. Lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese, graphite, for example, are important for battery, and rare earth elements are important for electric vehicles and wind turbines. According to IEA, the production of lithium and cobalt alone may increase by 500% by 2050 to meet demand for clean energy. This requires significant investment today, as the average time from discovery to first production for mines is around 16 years. Now it's been shortened significantly, but average 16 years. Moreover, the world is in the early phase of new industrial age, the age of clean energy technology. Clean energy technologies produce lower carbon emissions, yet, almost paradoxically, many need more minerals than the fossil fuel-based ones that they are replacing. Many of the minerals feeding the rapidly expanding solar, wind, hydro, battery, and electric vehicle industries are sourced from Africa. The rising profile of minerals feeding this new industrial age, marked by the falling cost of clean energy, gives Africa a new set of development opportunities to channel minerals into industrializing clean energy industries for Africa's own needs, alongside feeding global supply chains. The global decarbonization agenda of cutting greenhouse gas emissions by setting targets for the phase out of high emission sources and ramping up low carbon replacements worldwide require economic adjustments that are creating new dynamics between mineral producing and mineral consuming regions as captured in the concept of critical minerals. Several developed countries have identified as critical minerals a set of minerals essential for clean energy equipment, high technology, and defense industries with limited sources of supply or vulnerable supply chains. Furthermore, they are taking steps to secure access to these critical minerals by seeking diversified supply chains. In the African context, these minerals are considered strategic or green, as indicated in the developed African Green Mineral Strategy, following two main criteria: minerals that are used in clean energy technologies and green industries, and minerals that are feedstocks into the mining supply chain. Distinguished participants, Africa's minerals could be an important driver for Africa's structural transformation through mineral-based industrialization induced by value addition on the continent, and through a strategic use of minerals to enable spillover effects to other sectors of the economy and trigger inclusive growth and structural transformation as enshrined in the Agenda 2063 of the African Union towards the Africa we want. In this particular observation, that has led to the elaboration, it is this particular observation that has led to the elaboration of the Africa Mining Vision in 2009. That was 15 years ago. The Africa Mining Vision was adopted by the African Union Heads of States in 2009 with a vision to ensure that minerals play a greater transformative role in the development of the continent. The AMV was essentially ahead of its time, as at that time, nobody was really talking about mineral-based industrialization, and everything was exported raw. Now, even other continents are asking us about the Africa Mining Vision and how that is. Even some European countries are emulating the principles of the Africa Mining Vision, the concept that it has to lead to sustainable development and local content as well. In this vision, minerals are considered as key drivers for industrialization and transformation of economic structures, essential for the continent's long-term sustainable growth. The African Minerals Development Center was established by the statutes of the African Union as a specialized agency of the African Union to coordinate and oversee the implementation of the Africa Mining Vision and its accompanying action plan. The AMDC undertakes this mandate in conjunction with member states, regional economic communities, the private sector, civil society, and collaborating institutions. Adoption of the AMV and the action plan is the first step to change the narrative regarding benefit generation from exploitation of mineral resources in Africa. While the minerals rush for decarbonization agenda is an opportunity, in Africa, with over 1 billion people and 55 countries, 600 million people are still in the dark without energy. Africa cannot afford to remain passive or on the sidelines while these processes of tectonic shifts occur in the world. Africa's significant endowment in these strategic minerals has established it as a renewed area of geopolitical contestation as Western and Eastern powers attempt to consolidate their power and secure supply chains. As mentioned, for Africa, our strategic minerals promises not only improved revenue and income, but more importantly, a much bigger opportunity need to be seized. This is a big opportunity to harness and really practically ensure that we benefit from these minerals, building mineral value chains to manufacture renewable energy equipment that harvest the continent's vast renewable energy potential to provide clean energy to provide clean energy to the more than 600 million people. The continent has a development vision of green economic growth that is socially inclusive, low carbon, and uses digital technology to enhance productivity. Africa has now a chance to develop a strategy for minerals mined on the continent that are crucial in the age of clean energy technology. Yet, despite this wealth, many African nations struggle with energy poverty. To bridge this gap, we must turn on innovation. That's why I'm really particularly happy about the topic of this conference. Innovation in technology, policy, and financing will be the catalyst that drives us towards equitable energy access. It is not enough to extract and export raw materials. We must add value, develop local industries, and build resilient energy systems that meet the needs of our people. Technological innovations such as off-grid solar systems, mini-grids, and energy storage solutions are already transforming lives in rural and underserved communities. These technologies are providing clean, reliable electricity where traditional power grids cannot reach. But innovation must also extend to how we govern and regulate the energy sector. We need policies to encourage investment, foster competition, and ensure that the benefits of Africa's resource wealth is shared equitably. Innovation does not happen in isolation. It requires collaboration between governments, the private sector, civil society, and the international community. Partnerships are essential to mobilize the resources, knowledge, and expertise needed for Africa's energy transformation. We must also recognize the importance of empowering local communities by involving them in decision-making processes and ensuring that they benefit from resource development. We can create a more inclusive and sustainable energy futures. Local ownership and participation are key to long-term success of any energy initiative. As we look to the future, our vision for Africa must be one of inclusive and sustainable development. Energy is at the heart of this vision. By harnessing Africa's resource wealth and fueling innovation, we need to ensure that every African has access to the energy they need to thrive. This is not just a moral imperative. It is an economic necessity. Equitable energy access will unlock new opportunities for businesses, create jobs, and drive economic growth across the continent. The African Minerals Development Centers has collaborated with the African Development Bank, the Africa Legal Support Facility, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and other institutions to develop the Africa Green Minerals Strategy to proactively engage with the new conditions flowing from the energy transition. The Africa Green Minerals Strategy is poised to become a game changer for Africa's mineral-based industrialization towards minerals for sustainable development and structural transformation. The strategy defines 4 pillars on advancing mineral resources development, developing people and technological capacity, developing mineral value chains to achieve resource-based industrialization through supply chain development, beneficiation and value addition, and access to the wider regional and continental market through the African Continental Free Trade Area, as well as mineral stewardship to responsibly guide the environmental, social, and governance aspects of green minerals exploitation and utilization. The draft African Green Minerals Strategy was presented at a recent African Union Specialized Technical Committee meeting on trade, industry, and minerals that was held in Malabo in Equatorial Guinea in May 2024. Given the importance of this strategy, the member states requested for additional months to really undertake local consultation for all stakeholders. So we will be very pleased to share the draft with all present here for further consultations, as was requested by us by our committee. Achieving a better future towards the Africa we want will require an unprecedented strategic vision. Africa must have a coherent and comprehensive strategic development vision for itself with regards to its own inclusive growth and sustainable development. Africa must also have a plan to scale up energy production and access while leapfrogging outdated polluting energy systems to modern, affordable, renewable energy systems. Africa's leadership must aspire to place the well-being for all its people living together within thriving ecosystems and a stable global climate as the primary driving force of its development agenda. This requires proactive planning, foresight, and clear roadmap based on cost and well-being analysis to address external risks and opportunities. The choices that Africa makes about energy system to ensure a just energy transition will influence many other aspects of development, and it should provide accessible, affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy to around 600 million of Africans. Energizing Africa is the optimal and just path to the energy transition should take for its people and the planet. Africa's energy transition presents at least two key advantages to inform the strategy to energize Africa. First, Africa possesses vast untapped renewable energy resources. It has hydropower potential, it has solar, it has wind, and all the others. Africa's right to development would be better served through renewable systems that can achieve universal access, enable food security and regional industrialization while advancing African and global climate goals. A just energy transition must also ensure the right choices about renewable energy. The transition to a new model of energy provision must meet human rights, social, and environmental standards. The role of civil society organizations is very crucial in that aspect, as they will need to raise awareness about the right choices and about new energy systems to relevant stakeholders. From an African perspective, the concept of just transition needs to be fully unpacked to ensure it is a genuine effort to transform the global economy into a sustainable, prosperous, and equitable system. The priority for most African countries is first and foremost access to energy, as there is no baseline for transition to begin with. Therefore, the right balance needs to be made between the right to and the transition to renewable energy. If Africa desires to commit to a renewable energy, it must assert its sovereignty over the strategic green minerals resources and develop its industrial policy accordingly, while striving to progressively move to renewable energy sources with a view to investing more in modern, clean, and renewable resources. None of these goals, however, will be met without coordinated action by member countries and developed economies fulfilling their obligations to fund the transition to build the Africa value chain. This window of opportunity could be very limited in time, as alternative to strategic minerals could be found, as these minerals also could be stranded like their fossil fuels friends. Therefore, the time is now for African countries to have a unified position on the global energy transition agenda and take advantage of this unique window of opportunity to grow their economies, transform structurally, and secure prosperity through the energy transition. In closing, I urge all of us here today to commit to this cause. Let us work together to harness Africa's resource wealth, fuel innovation, and achieve equitable energy access for all. The challenges are great, but so too are the opportunities. With determination, collaboration, and a shared vision, we can build a brighter future for Africa and for the world. I thank you.
Let's give it a resounding round of applause. Let's keep it moving. We can do this together. We can work it out together. Oh, whilst the MCs take the stage, before we move to the second session. Oh yeah, that's right. We have picked a key from the speech well read.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marie Peter, affectionately known in her inner circles as the Queen of Minerals. And indeed, she is the Queen of Minerals. Please give it up to Dr. Marie Peter. So quickly, once again, our online audience, we do appreciate you. We are moving straight to our presentation for the day. And we are honored to have the presence of the Executive Director of Financial Accountability and Corporate Transparency, popularly known as the FAC Coalition, a non-partisan alliance of over 100 states, national and international organizations. He is formerly the director of Oxfam America Global Policy, Advocacy, and Program. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Ngari to give us the presentation for today.
Mr. Ngari, a round of applause. When it comes to energy, he's special. Whilst he takes the stage, let's put our hands together for Mr. Ingari.
Well, good morning, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. It feels like a homecoming. I feel like I'm with family, and it's a real pleasure to be here to see how far the African Center for Energy Policy has come. As Minister Amin said yesterday, I believe I was there at the birth, and it's great to see how much credibility and attention and impact ACEP has had over the last decade and a half. So congratulations to Ben and the whole ACEP team for putting this conference together, not only from an intellectual standpoint, but from a logistical standpoint. It's been truly flawless, so congratulations. I have one point to make today, and I hope I'll be relatively short. And that point is that without collective global action to tackle illicit financial flows, the project to transition Africa to a clean and equitable energy future will be under great threat. And not only Africa, but the global project to address the climate crisis and to make the energy transformation happen will be under threat without tackling illicit financial flows. And that will require great effort, importantly on the part of global north countries who are often in a position of facilitating illicit financial flows, as I will explain, but also on the part of global south countries. As Mabel mentioned, I represent the FACT Coalition. We are a US-based civil society coalition. We have more than 100 members. We represent a cross-sector of society, including labor unions, environmental organizations, faith groups, human rights groups, anti-corruption groups, international development organizations, all centered around the belief that we must fix the problem of dirty money coming into the United States, and we must fix the problem of tax avoidance by multinational companies. Without fixing these problems, so many of our other aspirations related to human rights, related to addressing the climate crisis, related to democratic development are all under threat. If I had been here a few years ago at the oil and gas conference, I would have talked about offshore. And if you had heard me talk about offshore, you would have thought about offshore oil and gas. But today I'm here to talk about another offshore, and that's the world of offshore illicit finance, offshore financial secrecy. Curbing illicit finance must be at the top of the innovative financing mechanisms that have been discussed in this conference to provide governments with the revenues they need to invest in the energy transformation and to grapple with the impacts of the climate crisis. And as I'll discuss, this really requires global cooperation. You may be familiar with some of these statistics, but I will repeat them nonetheless. The UN has estimated that Africa loses approximately $88 billion from illicit financial flows every year. This includes tax evasion, money laundering, and tax avoidance. Curbing this phenomenon could have Africa's social development goals financing gap estimated at $200 billion annually. And if you look at corporate tax avoidance, more than $1 trillion in corporate profits are booked in tax havens every year. And this is predominantly by large American multinationals, according to the EU Tax Observatory. Profit shifting costs countries $100 to $240 billion in lost tax revenues every year. And we know that this is especially harmful to countries in the global south relative to their GDPs. Now, I'm an American, for better or for worse, so I'm going to talk about what is happening in the United States and why the US is currently a magnet for dirty money, and why we need to fix this, and the reforms that we are making, and the impact we're having as the FACT Coalition. Right now, unfortunately, the US is ranked #1 on the Tax Justice Network's Financial Secrecy Index. We even beat Switzerland. It's funny that when that happened, I got a lot of calls from Swiss journalists wanting to talk to me about it. I'm like, hey, you're still #2, so don't go crazy. But it is an important recognition that we have a problem in the US. And so for the US to be credible, as well as other global G7 countries like the UK and others, to be credible in terms of talking about corruption, talking about good governance, they need to fix their own financial secrecy problems. Luckily, with the Biden administration in the last few years, there has been a serious recognition that the US does have a problem. For example, Janet Yellen, our finance minister, our treasury secretary, said in 2021 at the Summit for Democracy that there's a good argument that right now the best place to hide and launder ill-gotten gains is actually the United States. Anonymous shell companies, money laundering through real estate, money laundering through private investment vehicles. These are some of the ways that corrupt officials, transnational criminal networks are able to hide dirty money in the United States. Just to give you a few examples, real concrete examples. The scourge of shell companies. Shell companies, you don't know who the real owner is. It's extremely difficult to find out. They're used for a variety of nefarious purposes. A very recent example in 2024, US federal prosecutors have alleged that funds embezzled from state coffers were used to purchase luxury apartment at the Trump Tower in New York for the use of the daughter of the president of Congo, Brazzaville, Sassou Nguesso. The complaint describes how a web of shell companies ultimately owned by Sassou Nguesso was allegedly used to funnel millions of dollars out of the Republic of Congo. As I said at the time to reporters, it is an unfortunate reminder of the gaping hole that we have in our anti-money laundering regime. Another great example, President Jammeh, former President Jammeh of the Gambia, had a mansion probably not more than 30 kilometers from the White House. And this was money that was stolen from the Gambian people. And it took years and years of investigation to find out who actually owned this mansion. Investigations by Gambian activists and law authorities in the United States. So this really shows you how easy it is to make, for example, an all-cash purchase. You can show up with bags of cash and buy a house in the United States with no questions asked. Turning to the issue of corporate profit shifting and tax avoidance, the OECD has estimated that global tax losses from so-called base erosion and profit shifting are in the region of $100 to $240 billion a year. IMF staff have suggested that countries in sub-Saharan Africa are losing between $450 and $730 million yearly in corporate tax revenues because of profit shifting by multinational entities in the mining sector alone. So you can imagine, this is probably a lowball estimate, you can imagine across different corporate sectors what's going on. There's a recent case of Coca-Cola where they have been charged with profit shifting and avoiding taxes by the US Internal Revenue Service, and now they owe potentially up to $13 billion in back taxes. The EU Tax Observatory said that low and lower middle income countries lose the most corporate tax revenue, both relative to their GDP and relative to their corporate and total tax revenue. And as you heard Minister Amin yesterday say, it's important that corporate tax avoidance and increased tax compliance be part of the solution to finding the revenues for the energy transformation and for addressing climate change. There's currently a system in place that is operated by the OECD for so-called country-by-country reporting. Country-by-country reporting reveals information about a multinational company's tax practices. It shows you how much they're paying in taxes in every country of operation, their revenues, profits, turnover, the number of employees in each country. This information is vitally important, not only for tax authorities, but also for investors to understand the types of risks that they might be facing if they're investing in a company and the type of aggressive tax avoidance that these companies might be practicing. So if you're looking at a country-by-country report and you see that say an oil company is booking $100 million in a place like Bermuda and they show that they have 2 employees, those are either very productive employees or there's profit shifting and tax avoidance going on. So what is happening in terms of addressing these problems that I've laid out? I think it's important to note that there's a huge amount of collective action now and attention to end the offshore secrecy world. But it's important to note that the massive new investments that are needed to fund the energy transition, that are needed to address the climate adaptation and mitigation needs, this avalanche of money, if it indeed comes, will present a huge boom of illicit financial, will pose a big risk for a boom in illicit financial flows. And as has been mentioned, a lot of these so-called critical minerals, or the minerals needed for decarbonization, will occur in countries with weak, poor, and failing resource governance. Corrupt funds want to go to rule of law jurisdictions. That's why it's so important that the global war on dirty money should be part of the solution for an equitable and forceful response to the climate crisis. And that's why it's so important that rule of law jurisdictions like the United States address their dirty money problem. To turn to the United States and the recent reforms that have happened, one is the passage of the Corporate Transparency Act. The Corporate Transparency Act is probably the most important anti-money laundering law passed in the United States since the Patriot Act. It is a law that requires the disclosure of the true owners of these anonymous shell companies. That law is being implemented right now this year. The Treasury Department is collecting information on who the real owners of these anonymous shell companies are. And soon there will be procedures in place to allow foreign governments access to this information. So if you can imagine, Ghana's Financial Intelligence Center is investigating transnational financial crime. They need information on who owns an anonymous shell company in the United States. Soon those systems will be in place for transnational cooperation to address these types of financial crimes. We are also making real progress to deal with money laundering in real estate. We expect this week to see the Treasury Department, for the first time ever, issue a final regulation creating a comprehensive and nationwide regime to tackle money laundering in the real estate sector, as well as to tackle money laundering in the private investment sector. Finally, there's true global momentum for public country-by-country reporting. So the publicly available information so you can understand and assess profit-shifting strategies by multinational companies. The EU already has a limited form of public country-by-country reporting in place. You will start to see information coming in the next year. We expect to see Australia, pass a public country-by-country reporting law in the next few weeks. And at the FACT Coalition, we've been pushing our own regulator, the Securities and Exchange Commission, to promulgate a regulation for public country-by-country reporting. And recently, we had investors worth $2.3 trillion in assets under management call for this reform. So you can see there's also a convergence between the interests of investors and the interests of tax authorities in Global South countries. Tomorrow at a tax conference sponsored by Oxfam in Ghana, we will be launching a new report looking at how multinational tax transparency can help tax administration and enforcement in the Global South. So I'd like to conclude with re-emphasizing my main point, as the BBC says, and now the main points once again. The main point of my presentation is that we need to have collective action to tackle illicit financial flows. This must be firmly part of the energy transformation agenda, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you very much.
A round of applause again. The details well noted, especially for taxes, which must be reconsidered in the space of energy. We craving for maximization of all investments. Once again, Mr. MC, allow me to call for a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ian, for your presentation. I think yesterday we were having a conversation on how do we raise the necessary financing for climate action in Africa. And today he's shown us the biggest hole that has been draining the financing. So it sets the context for our next panel that is looking at how do we localize value chains from critical minerals to clean energy. And I will invite our moderator, who has more than a decade of experience in fiscal justice, natural resource governance policy, and advocacy and movement building in Africa. She is currently the Partnership and Institutional Learning Manager with the Tax Justice Network Africa. Please let's invite Nelly Musimbi.
When the day goes on, how we can get there? Oh,
Good morning. Good morning. I hope you're all well. Thank you so much. I like the music composer. I hope he'll do something for me as well. So thank you very much. As introduced, I'm called Nelly. I work with the Tax Justice Network Africa. I'm based in Kampala, Uganda, and I'm so happy to be here. I've been to Accra before, so I always enjoy being here. I don't enjoy flying here, but I do enjoy coming to Accra. I have a very distinguished panel for today's session. Our topic for discussion today and the session generally will look at building an integrated regional value chain of energy transition technologies from minerals to clean energy. It seems a mouthful, but we have a very good panel that's going to dissect that. So I would like to bring them forward, and I'll start with Dr. Marit, who you've already met. I can also still emphasize her expertise, bringing a lot of experience, and she has played a key role in advancing the Africa mining vision. Her experience includes leading the minerals portfolio at UNECA, serving as Chief Technical Advisor at UNDP Mozambique, and she's currently the lead at the Africa mining. As you can see that Interim Director, African Minerals Development Center. Welcome, Dr. Marit. Our next panelist is Dr. Oliver Maponga, who I had the pleasure to get stuck with in transit as we were coming. Please welcome him with a round of applause. With a PhD in mineral economics, Dr. Maponga has extensive experience in the mineral sector, contributing to the development of the Africa Mining Vision and advocating for a continental approach to critical energy transition minerals. Welcome, Dr. Oliver. Then our next panelist is Dr. David Ofosu. Please forgive my East African accent if I've not pronounced it well. He's the founder and senior partner of AB and David Africa, a Pan-African business law firm with independent offices in 6 countries and a network of firms in 30 African countries. Welcome, Dr. David. Our next panelist is Ms. Providence Mavubi, Director of Industry and Agriculture at COMESA in Lusaka, Zambia, where she leads initiatives to promote competitive, sustainable agriculture and industries in the region. As you can see, a very extensive profile. And then our last panelist is Titus, Mr. Titus Gwemende, Division Director, Opportunity and Equity, Open Society Foundations, where he leads initiatives on just economies, resource economies, energy, geopolitics, anti-corruption, and climate change. Thank you very much, and we'll begin our discussion. I think I will take my seat as well. Just to say, this panel is very experienced in very many areas, and so the 4 thematic discussions or areas we're going to look at are geopolitical and security concerns, value addition, long-term strategic planning and risk management, local content and foreign investment trade-offs, regional integration and collaboration. So please bear with us if we find that we have tackled so many things at the same time. But we'll try to really blend with the overall discussion today. So we will start right away. Thank you very much. Right. So we're going to start with the issues around geopolitics and security concerns. I think, over the last 2 to 3 days, a number of speakers have given us really a broad understanding of what we're dealing with on the continent. And obviously the discussions around, green minerals, transition minerals, critical minerals. I mean, it goes without saying that a part of, the Africa continent feels like there is a scramble of some of these minerals, and perhaps maybe the African continent hasn't really understood what the implications are. And so, Dr. Marit, I'll start with you. Should Africa be concerned about the world's scramble for green minerals? And does it raise security concerns? And you can also, perhaps because I think you hinted on the green minerals strategy earlier, so just a little bit around that, but also, should we be concerned? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it works now. Should Africa be concerned about scramble? Yes, Africa should be concerned about that there is a minerals rush. But why I don't call it scramble, because we know. At that time, when there was a scramble for our resources, it was without our knowledge. Yeah. So we can't call it scramble when we know we have to be prepared. There's definitely a minerals rush towards the green. We call them, as I explained in my opening, we call them green. We don't call them critical, green or strategic. There's definitely a rush to acquire them. As I mentioned, the demand for these minerals is high. And there's one country that is dominating, which is China. And so the West, the other side of the West, woke up a little bit late to this because they had because of labor costs and other issues. Most of the value addition, most of the local processing on this value chain was done in China, but when they woke up, they realized that this is a geopolitical threat. And so now they're trying to reverse engineer and try to get to that space. And so for Africa, like I said, because now we know, we have to be prepared. We have to have a strategy. Everyone has a strategy for our raw materials, but do we have a strategy for our own selves? And we do. As I mentioned, we have the Africa Mining Vision. That was 2009. It was really ahead of its time. We are still, the elements of it can be very much for this situation. Now we have developed an African green mineral strategy, and that strategy, as I explained, it really goes through, it's about value addition, it's about making sure that the value is retained on the continent, we don't export raw material, we retain value. Even through, we heard about the illicit financial flows. We really have to ensure also that the revenue even has to be retained. So we have to be concerned about the scrambles, so to speak, but we have to be ready, we have to have it's like we are being suited for. We have a lot of suitors, and so we can choose which one is better for us. So it's really, like I said, we have to be coordinated, strategize, because we know what's coming. It's a concern, but it's nothing that we cannot overcome.
Thank you for that. Dr. Oliver, having been in this sector for a long time, do you also think it's not a scramble as well? There is a lot of demand, obviously, but should we fight back? Should we just wait until, or try and manage the suitors, as Dr. Marita said? Yeah, what was your view around that?
Thank you. I think it's scramble is an English word. we could use it, but the reality is, I think we hold the S's, so to speak, in terms of the transition. As Dr. Marit has elaborated on this quite extensively in her presentation, but the key issue is preparedness on our part. And preparedness speaks to what the chief executive of the Ghana Minerals Commission mentioned. It's about knowledge of what we've got, which is about exploration. Greenfields exploration, define our resource base, and then use that as a bargaining position. I think we hold the S's, so to speak. It's something that, as a continent, we should really move towards, investing in aeromagnetic surveys so that we delineate our resource base. We then go to the table with China and say, yes, this is what we've got, but our conditions for accessing, these are the conditions. And also, it's important that we develop, through frameworks like the Africa Mining Vision, Green Mineral Strategy, we develop a coordinated approach, not the rest to the bottom that we are familiar with or have experienced in the 80s and during the Washington Consensus. We have to have a coordinated approach, a unified approach, which enables us to say to China, to say to the EU that have come to the party late, to say to Americans that have also come to the party late, that, look, we hold these resources and they are going to be developed under these terms. Yeah. We set up frameworks like Marit spoke about, local content, among other frameworks that we could use to ensure that we deepen the developmental role of the sector. I think I want to emphasize that for us, from my position, it's critical, but most importantly, it's strategic. How can the minerals actually support our socio-economic transformation? That's the key thing for us. It's about industrialization. It's about the SDG. It's about raising the standards of living of Ghanaians from the mining sector, from the critical, what we are calling critical minerals or strategic minerals, whatever the name they come in, but we are saying this is a resource that should support our development. Yeah. I think that will be my take. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I can come to Titus as well around this. There is always the politics around minerals development, extractives development, and I know you've been on the continent, worked on the continent for a long time, and also the competition. So maybe you could speak to how we navigate the politics around this, the competition for critical minerals, obviously, because you find countries have been, countries where I come from, where we're starting to develop the fossil fuel projects, and then suddenly we are told, oh, you must transition, and then there is the, scramble, for lack of a better word, for the minerals that are going to drive that transition. So in your opinion, how do we navigate the politics around, this sort of critical rush for critical minerals, so that we don't lose out as a continent?
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps to sort of unpack the security element, because I think that's really crucial. In what way has the so-called rush impacted how we see security, and should we be worried? I mean, the first thing is, and Ghanaians, you're fine, so this doesn't affect you. I'm talking about other countries. It is the militarization of resource-rich regions. If you look at what's happening in Central Africa, you have soldiers of fortune, private security companies operating without licenses, and you have zones in which the state can't even access because of some shady companies mining, and they are in a rush to supply materials for some batteries. So we are seeing potentially and worrisomely the militarization of some of our richest resource regions on the continent. The second worrisome thing is authoritarian resilience and authoritarian resurgence. There is a gentleman in another part of the continent, when they discovered oil, he said, "My oil," when he was talking to opposition leaders. With a straight face, it is my oil. And so once you discover strategic minerals before institutions are strong or before deep democracy, you're seeing authoritarian regimes becoming more resilient. They have easy rents. They are difficult to hold to account, because even our allies in the West who used to help us will not be there to support you, because all they want is security of supply. So it's becoming harder to challenge or to even tell them to stop going for third term. You're seeing third termism. You're seeing coups and counter coups. In almost all those countries, we have discovered strategic minerals. And so the challenge for us is, how do we continue to restrain and constrain power in the context of this? And the third, obviously, is once you have this race or competition, rights no longer matter. It's security or supply chain security. And so what it then means is it's becoming harder and harder to talk about rights. It's almost like you're wasting people's time. You NGO people, what rights? You want FDI. And so rights become marginalized. It almost becomes a nuisance. And we must, colleagues, especially as Africans, not reproduce mistakes of the past. It was Africans who were moved out forcibly without consultation. It was Africans who just woke up and lost land, livelihoods. And so if we keep reproducing that, what then happens is you're going to have young people who will have no options but to feel radicalized. Go to northern Mozambique. You remove us from our land. You marginalize. You leave us from your value chain. What then happens? We take up AK-47. And so you're seeing 16-year-olds shooting people all over the point. So a radicalization of young people who feel excluded from value chains is a critical. And last point concerning security is that we are seeing cowboys with no experience working with communities getting licenses to mine graphite or manganese and so. I'm saying cowboys because there are companies that have no history engaging communities suddenly having licenses. And so you are seeing clashes between new companies that are high-tech, California-type companies, Palo Alto, Silicon Valley. No experience working with communities, no interest working with communities. So talk of consultation, talk of all this. Harvard and University of Queensland talked about the cost of conflict. That is increasing because some of these high-tech companies have no experience working on this. And so what does it mean in terms of our own positioning? I think we need strong, capable states that are democratic, entrepreneurial, and accountable. States that have authority in the Weberian sense. A state that can control its own territory. A state that can negotiate licenses, that can get resource rent. So a strong state is important. When you look at China, Germany, these are strong, capable states. And that is a crucial element. The second and final thing is, of course, what Nkuruma taught us, and I'm glad we're doing this in Ghana, One Africa, collaboration of critical resource-rich global south countries. Malawi cannot be moving around negotiating about rare earths. Malawi is too small for this. We need that collaborative stage, and this is where Dr. Marit and AU is going to be important. Let's leverage the political capital of AU and negotiate, organize, learn as resource-rich regions in Africa, collaborating with Indonesia, Latin American Triangle, Lithium Triangle, and global South countries collaborating. I think we're going to do much better than before.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. You talk about collaboration, and we'll dig deep a little bit into that later on. I wanted us to move to now the issue around value addition, because it keeps coming up in some of the things that have been mentioned already, and why it's important, I think, for countries, especially resource-rich countries, those who are hosting critical minerals, to think about value addition. I come from a country where the president is really big on value addition. They would rather not export any of the minerals, you know. And so I want to come to Dr. David here on how African countries can navigate, some of those issues around value addition, the long-term strategic planning and risk management, particularly how we can mitigate risks associated with potential fluctuations in demand and pricing of green minerals, but really why value addition is really important for us, because we can't just simply export these minerals. I mean, that conversation needs to be transformed, right? So yeah,
Thank you. Starting with why value addition is important, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it goes without saying that, I mean, I take it for granted that it is important, because once you get a higher value, it is better than a lower value. And let me just illustrate with bauxite as an example, and that's a sector I've worked in for a while. The average cost of a ton of bauxite over the last 15 years or so will fluctuate anything between $30 to $40 per ton. Now, for that same tonnage, if you moved it to refined bauxite, you are talking about $2,000 per ton. And if you moved it downstream to aluminum after smelting, you are talking about $6,000 equivalent. So the value addition is very, clear. And if you took Ghana as an example, you will see that we have an enormous amount of bauxite, but the downstream, which is the smelter, and the very downstream, which is the aluminum foils, the coils, etc., have not been developed. And they've not been developed because between the raw bauxite, we have been lifting 50,000 metric tons per annum, all the way, because our bauxite is sweet bauxite, to mix with Jamaican bauxite, have the alumina, and bring it back here to Valco to do the smelting. So, and the refinery is not a big issue, whereas the smelter would need about 400 megawatts of power to be able to function at least 4 or 5 ports. We need only 30 megawatts of power to do the refinery. So I think that is, but the question is, how do we mitigate price fluctuation, especially with so-called green grabbing and the stockpile of African critical minerals? I will deal with the traditional issues, and I'll come with the non-traditional issues. And the speaker before me has done excellent job on this. I agree with everything about him, except that before I go forward, I have to let him know that Ghana is not fine, contrary to what you think. We are not fine at all. I mean, we are just like any other African country, if not worse. And let's look at it from critical minerals only. This is a country where we have actually managed to, as it were, contaminate almost every drinking source because of artisanal mining, or so-called galamsey. And that is not done by Ghanaians, it's done by Chinese, mainly. Yeah. Mainly. And it's estimated that $4 billion worth of gold is exported unaccounted for. And it relates to the main theme about illicit money all around, etc. So we are not fine at all. In fact, we stand a danger of needing about $3 billion if we have to restore our waters too. But let me now come to the traditional, and again, I will return to the non-traditional. The way to stop the fluctuation of prices is 3 key things. One is price hedging. And if you look at the annualized average over the last 10 to 14 years, between 2010 to 2024, the prices have fluctuated between 10 to 20% up and down. So you can actually know exactly where the prices will fluctuate on the metal market, and you simply need to simply hedge the commodity. So that's traditional. I mean, anybody can do it. The second one, which is also traditional, is having a well-organized supplier contract arrangement. And for me, the way Africa can leverage it is to do supplier bids. In other words, we should not tie ourselves to one main buyer, whether China or US or Europe, etc. Why can't we make it a competitive bidding process? But that will not happen if we don't deal with what you were talking about. Let's take lithium. Zimbabwe has lithium, Nigeria has discovered lithium, Ghana has lithium in 2 fields already. But each of us is too small to have a strong negotiating position. If we came together, and the AFTA provides that forum for us to come together, we could then negotiate together, and Africa Mining Vision deals with that. But I will touch on Africa Mining Vision shortly. Just give me a couple of minutes as to what it is that we are overlooking. So if we came together, we can negotiate and do in such a way that we can control the prices. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire alone, and we always have to learn examples from other sectors, control 66 to 70% of cocoa. But we've never dictated the price. Until just about 3-4 years ago, when we decided to come together, and then we got some few dollars on top of each ton, and that's about it. And we went back to our old ways, right? I'll deal with the third traditional issue. The third traditional issue in dealing with this is to have a situation where you actually are negotiating the contracts in such a way that you are benchmarking the prices over time. So again, these can be dealt with. But let's deal with the non-traditional, which is actually the real problem in the room. Africa has always had the quote and unquote the best critical minerals, always. So this business about critical minerals and the value addition is not new. And I said this on Monday, I'm going to repeat. When the world needed the most critical mineral, the human might, we had it, but we were enslaved. When they needed gold, we had it. It's in London and in all the places taken from here. But how does that happen? Because we are divisive people. I will give you an example in Ghana, and I tweeted about this once. Just go around our villages at every festival. We carry our chiefs in palanquin, and they adorn their arms with gold, and they own no gold mine. How do you adorn your arms with gold, and that makes you okay? They are the same people whose forefathers sold us as slaves, right? So far as we remain divisive, so far as we don't understand that we were colonized by divide and rule, we cannot rethink and decide that unity doesn't mean being one, it means acting together. So the AFTA is clear, Africa Mining Vision is clear, but we need to actually forget about our heads of states. I forgot about them long ago. It's just only about 3 or 4 I listen to. We need to forget them and go to the masses, like the people in this room, and let them put so much pressure on our heads of states that they will understand that acting together is what will make us have that leverage. Otherwise, they will pop the champagne, and at the end of the day, if Zimbabwe decide to sell its lithium alone, it is too small out of the 55 countries to be able to leverage the Africa Mining Vision. That's important. The last one, and I'll end here, very short one. The last one is that we should get our leaders to stop thinking about it now. It is not that they don't know this. They know. But the presentation before about stealing and hiding it in Liechtenstein and US and the rest is because they need to make some money now. So they know the strategy. They cannot think long term. And unless we put pressure on them to stop thinking about it now, we will have all the mineral vision, the value addition strategies, etc., is going to come to naught. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hand over to Providence now on the same issue as well, value addition, how we mitigate the risks, but also to you, what is value addition? Why is it important?
Thank you again, Madam Nelly, and coming after my elder here to speak of value addition. I don't know what else I can add, but in my culture we have a saying that if a bird goes somewhere and live without talking, is I raise one. So I'm trying to translate it from my local language to English. So value addition, as he already highlighted, is transforming something from its raw form to another product, which is considered of high value than the way you found it. As he highlighted, I would really write on his intervention. We know that Ghana is one of the leading producers in gold, but how many of us are wearing gold products? Ladies, where is your earrings? Made in Ghana. I can see some of us were in African prints, but who's wearing a piece of earring or ring made in Ghana? None of us. At least this ring of mine was made in Zambia. That one I know because I live there. This one I got it in Dubai. So people are coming here in our country, get our raw material, go and add value. When we travel, like yesterday, the country rep of, I think UNDP said about it, we go shopping. We take that little money I make here in Ghana to go to spend it in Dubai, UK, or wherever. Because there's a lack of value addition in our countries. So we are exporting our raw materials. And now they have changed it into critical raw material. If you check the new European directive on critical material, Europeans want to do with business on Africa for only one thing, is they get our critical raw material and leave no value added to the production here, leave us poor the way they found us, leave us with a burden to deal with the environmental degradation that this will cause in the mining because we are not adding value. So in my view, we need to really invest on downstream processing and manufacturing. Let's go at the source. Let's start from there. Why would we have a truck moving from one region full of dust with our gold inside? Why can we not at least swift from the source? Swift that dust out. Do you know that dust that is being exported with a raw material? It increases the weight of the product exported, but the value we get is zero because they only get the gold. But they go and they use the same soil to do agriculture. That's why Israel is selling food to us. It is our soil that leave this continent to go to do agriculture in Israel. So we need really to invest in the downstream processing. Start with the basic, cleaning, assembling, and then at least, even if we are not to refine, let's sell a product which have no our soil. Let's have our soil. We need to work together, as they highlighted the previous speaker, on collective bargaining. With that collective bargaining, we'll never control the price. And it is historic. We found ourselves, our country, I come from a small country called Rwanda. I was born when Rwanda sold coffee at the auction in Kenya, and we have no control on that. Until some 20 years ago, the government decided we are no longer selling coffee at the auction in large volume. We start roasting coffee in Kigali before it is exported and sell it to Starbucks, where we get a premium price. So the same thing can be applied in our mining sectors to add value. We need also to ensure that our policies are coherent and speak to each other. I come from a trade background, but when you go to look at my counterpart in energy or environment, our policies don't speak together, and we are all working in one country. And when we are attracting investors to come and invest to add the value, because we cannot add the value, we were told we cannot add the value. So I'm saying, oh, Ghana is the best country to have this good microeconomics, good environment. But when you look at our policy, they contradict each other. And that's where the loophole is, and you find the Chinese and the others who are doing illicit trade use the same policy against our own government. That's why it is easy to have illicit financing, to export profit shifting, because our system, our regulatory framework do not speak to each other. So in order to increase value addition, we also need to tackle on that side and let's have the policymaker understand the sector from all the way from production to endpoint.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Providence. I'm just going to ask one more question around this on value addition, and maybe Titus and Dr. Marit, you can speak to this, because we've talked about sort of the policy level, the decisions that need to be made, the people who influence those decisions, but we also have the people who host those minerals and what kind of capacity they have to add value to these minerals, and so you find that there are so many international players. We talked about the Chinese and whoever, who come and set up base in those communities, and then they are the ones who are given the licenses to extract and maybe perhaps add value, you never know. But Titus, maybe I can come to you on this, why it is important, and even just the conversation, how we link the local communities to really benefit and play a role in value addition, because I feel like that is not empowering enough they probably don't even understand what value addition means, but you could speak to, the communities, the people who host the minerals, yeah.
Okay, for the people who host, it's both an economic and security imperative. Economic in the sense that, especially if you look at artisanal and small-scale mining, which is what I want to focus on. 40 million people work on artisanal small-scale mining. 150 million people depend on small-scale mining. 30% of cobalt is produced by ASM. And of that 30%, 70% is global output. 25% of 3T, tungsten, tantalum, tin. What am I trying to say? They are a reality. They are a strategic opportunity and economic imperative. They are here to stay. We can't wish ASM away. And I know there's almost a visceral hatred or opposition to anything ASM. People just imagine a young man with dust on his face, making noise. But some of them are actually fairly, complex and sophisticated. A first level and one easy opportunity is to ensure that those small-scale operators that are obviously and usually members of the community are part of the production line. And often they're excluded. There's total exclusion. What happens is a big company comes, gets a license where people have been producing ASM products, and they are completely moved from the field. And they are allocated to a concession where stones grow better than crops, where there is absolutely nothing, or they are left to move a tailing. So the first key thing, formalize, support, and recognize ASM, and provide the kind of capacity strengthening that is required so that they produce within the confines of the law, respect environmental rights, but actually operate as proper entrepreneurs who are at the lower ranks of the value chain. The third is the dialogue. Often it's a war, or almost like a Berlin Wall between ASM and LSM. It is important to have robust and meaningful dialogue between those operators. It could be dialogue around concessions, it could be dialogue around how to manage, or it could be dialogue around supply, training, and so forth and so forth. The capital aspect is important. Often it's not billions, and the state could come in. The state or some of the LSM operators could come in, provide capital for equipment, provide capital so that they register concessions, provide capital so that they move their product, but capital is going to be important. The equipment is also going to be crucial, and being able to sell locally or within easy. Places like Zimbabwe, the millers actually come and buy gold straight from ASM at the local and provincial level. So what that also does is to protect the security of ASM, because now no one is going to rob them because you actually sell at source. And so some of those mechanisms are important. So supporting that ASM is an important component in integrating local communities within the value chain. The second one is, of course, ensuring that there are local suppliers, so some of the feedstocks, particularly for mining. It's not everything that needs to be imported from outside or from out of the province. There are lots of feedstocks that local communities could actually support, and it's important to that. The first and small point that I want to talk about is really about urban mining and what local communities could do. Urban mining is where we essentially harvest minerals from electronic waste. And that's also now some of the emerging issues around recycling. Why is this important? Japan can now harvest more gold from electronic waste than South Africa has gold reserves. Just think of that for a second. And Japan, I think in 2005, recycled 100,000 tons. Now they can do 300,000 tons. So this is also a big opportunity. Communities can be involved just at the assembling, providing, collecting, and at the first level of that a collection of waste before it is moved to a certain place that is going to be recycled. We are seeing this in Japan, we are seeing this in China, where local communities are important at the first level of the recycling process. So those are some of the few ways in which communities can also be integrated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Merritt, you want to add to that as well, but also speaking to organizations here that work with communities, perhaps helping them understand what value there is in supporting communities to, get involved in the value addition processes. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think Titus talked about the ASM, so let me go a step up, and I'll go down to the local communities, because the issue of value addition is very important. And I like the colleague from Ghana talking about the bauxite value chain. And I was in a side event yesterday also about industrial policy in Ghana, and I think they are strategizing and prioritizing. I think they were talking about agro-processing and others. I mean, they were emphasizing in that side event that, Ghana cannot do everything, for example. So there needs to be a regional collaboration depending on each country's competitive or comparative advantage. I want to take it up again because I have a privilege to be in a UN Secretary General panel on critical energy transition minerals. And it's interesting that, it's a global, so it's not only, it's global south, west, southern countries, everyone. And value addition is not on their agenda. And we fight for that space because, historically, and it's not a scramble per se, but it's historically Africa is just being a raw material exporter. So somewhere we lost that space. And then they come up with all these excuses saying, oh, you don't have the required energy, technology, skills, capital, and finance. But we have, and with UNECA, we had this study, Bloomberg study that was commissioned, that showed that Africa, especially DRC, had the advantage, cost and emissions advantage to have a precursor plant in the DRC. And so that we put their thesis upside down. So we have that, and Zambia now has joined. So they are at the precursor. They have a specialized economic zone, but then what do they need? They need technology, they need off-takers, and the technology owners are still in the, well, not in the West, they're in the East, they're China, Koreas of this world, the battery technology, and then the skills also needs to be transferred if we want to talk about the real value addition, not just the small one, polishing and lapidary for small-scale mining, but we're talking about the transformative ones. Because at the end of the day, why we talk about this resource curse, so to speak, why we're not, it's because we're not value adding. We're not really getting value out of our minerals. We're always talking on the margins, the small things, the changes that we make, but we need like a transformative. And this is the conversation the West doesn't want you to have. This is the reality. So we really have to. That's why I am encouraged by Ghana, but we need a regional forces. I mean, we need like to put our, and I speak as African Union, which is paradoxical because I know that we have, when we go to these countries, we talk with, they say yes, 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 but then we see them negotiating and dealing, bilateral with one country, with EU, or so we are a bit baffled even from our side. The point is that, we are in the right direction. That's why I don't like the scramble. But we need to put our ass together because value addition, deliberate policies, deliberate industrial policies. They don't even like the word industrial policy. We fight for the word industrial because they developed using those industrial. I'm not saying that we should do the same thing as they did. I mean, there are green industrialization processes which are cleaner, not polluting. We are aware of the climate and other considerations, but this is where we feel that we can be transformative, and we really have to push hard. And those skills can be acquired, the technology can be acquired, and the finance, I like the illicit financial flow. We can always reverse that if we are aware on how to have, and we are working on those transfer pricing and other issues, how we can get back up. But we need coordinated approach among African countries and also with the global south. I was just talking about Indonesia. They managed, and regarding the price that our colleague from Dr. David was talking about, the price, and even that the fair trade. We have institutions like the WTO not encouraging at all value-added products. So what did Indonesia do? They banned exports of raw nickel. At the time, even the EU put them to the court, but they just went to their policy, and now they're one of the biggest. They went into the value chains, not only just the battery, they're now manufacturing cars with China. The point is, if we are deliberate, we are very much strategic, it can be done, despite. We're trying to get into that space, but it's a battle. The fair trade issue is a battle.
Yeah.
So that's why I come back, but I will leave here. That's how I come back. They all benefit, local communities, everyone, because that's when you create jobs, that's when you create the whole, the economies of scale. Otherwise, you just do things in the margin and no transformation happens.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Oliver, you have the last word on this particular area of value addition, so please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think just to re-emphasize the issue of value addition, two issues, value addition as well as collaboration and coordination. I think if we are talking value addition, we are talking multiplier effects. We are talking industrialization. And really, Africa is now in a phase where we are looking at using our resources to propel industrialization. And the only way we can do that is through value addition. I think it's very, very important that we stand on our feet, we stand shoulder to shoulder as African countries and push for more value addition to our mineral commodities before they are exported. I think you will agree with me that we've got centuries of mining on the continent, right? But very little to show for all that mining on the continent.
Yeah.
But yet, economies that do not have minerals are actually leading. I mean, the other day I was reading about how Brazil's petroleum sector grew. Similar, the stuff that we are talking about today here. What is used in Brazil should be made in Brazil. That was the approach they took. And really, it was more about local content, Brazilian activity, and developing their own sector. I think that's what Africa has to do. We've got the resources, not only individually, but collectively. We're talking about critical energy transition minerals. I think all of them are found on the African continent. But as Marit said earlier in a presentation, technology is evolving. Two fronts. The first front is technology for delineation of resources is evolving, right? More material is coming, is becoming mineable, is becoming a reserve. That's a challenge to our dominant position because it then brings down the price. Technology is also developing at the end of the battery production chain. Our materials, our salts, our lithium salts are being replaced by sodium, for example. And that research is ongoing. So we need really to move with speed if we are going to exploit the opportunities that are coming from the critical energy transition minerals. I also want to touch briefly on Titus' point around ASM. I think the story of ASM is a story that is very close to the heart of a lot of people, mine involved. I think we look at the critical ASM triangle that we have used over the years to say, how do we address the cycle of poverty within ASM? It's about looking at the capitalization angle, that's one. Looking at the marketing angle, that's two. Looking at the capacity angle, that's three. Those are the three anchors of what we call the golden triangle of ASM support. And really, when you look at that golden triangle of ASM support, the technology angle, it's about supporting the technological endowment of the artisanal and small-scale mine. I mean, in Ghana, I don't know whether you still have the process of technical support to ASM, like we do in agriculture, right? We've got the sort of the external support to agriculture. It's exactly the same type of thinking within ASM. In Zimbabwe, for example, we used to have that working very well until something happened. Yeah. Something happened, right? It's not working very well anymore. But I think the point I'm trying to make is it's a very important sector that we need to support. That requires state support. I think I was listening to the chief executive of the Ghana Chamber of Mines talking about exploration and saying maybe we could use pension funds. And my reaction to my colleague here was, you can't put my pension fund into exploration where maybe the return could be zero. Yeah. And it's a big risk. It's a big risk because you can lose everything. But what we are saying is, look, we generate revenues. Okay, a proportion of those revenues. Put it aside, for a rainy day. Build up resources over time and then invest in geological exploration, which is key. You can't talk of mining without exploration as the lifeblood. That's the lifeblood of the mining sector. Yeah. So we need to be clear about that. Lastly, local communities. I think the African Minerals Development Center, they've got a great framework. The African Mining Vision, free and prior informed consent. I think the issues are very, very well covered in the Africa Mining Vision. What we need is, I'm challenging now the people in this room. How can we push our member states to internalize and domesticate these principles that we've put together? I mean, it was a long and painful process to develop the AMV, to develop the green mineral strategy. It's about bringing it at home. And I think it's the responsibility of each and every one of us to be able to push that agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Oliver. And I think your points have given us a good segue into the local content discussion and foreign investment trade-offs, because you did hint on those issues of local content. And so I'll come back to Dr. David now about, our focus on local content. And maybe the question there is, what should we focus on? Should it be ownership of resources by local companies, technology transfer, or capacity building? It's one thing to have all these ideas, but if people are not really empowered enough to feed into this process, what does it help? Yeah, so your views around that.
Yeah, thank you. I will come to that, but permit me to be controversial. I think at times the way we think about things really creates a problem for me. First, we are talking about value addition. You cannot add value if you don't first have value. And we don't seem to be talking about the value. We are talking only about value addition. Now, we must first determine the value. And one of the speakers had mentioned the issue of mineral resource estimates. I think the chief executive of the Chamber of Mines. I have led a project advising the government here where for the first time we did a JOC certification of bauxite. And in one of the blocks in a big field, Ghana had got 3 places where bauxite is. Just one block. The estimate established about 150 times what had always been predicted since 1948. And if you extrapolate, we have about twice the estimates, and this is JOC certified. Now, when it is JOC certified, it means I know exactly how much I have underground. If I know how much I have underground, I should be able to place value on the unmined mineral. If it didn't have value, why are you adding? The unmined mineral has value. And it is about time we start thinking about it. If, for example, we go to IMF as Ghana borrowing $3 billion, if I were to ask you what is the worth of all your minerals now, can anybody tell me? I know Uganda has tried to do JOC certification. It's about time we certify the mineral, not just the estimates, but put a value on it. And I will recommend highly to the Africa Mining Vision. If you want discussions, I can tell you, exactly how we have done this and the lessons learned. That's the first point before I come to this local content issue. The second point is this business about critical minerals. Critical to who? Who is the mineral critical to? If a mineral is critical to those who see the energy transition and believe that without these critical minerals of cobalt and all that which is largely here, they cannot transition to their new economy, then it being critical to us must itself have value, right? So it's critical to them. But because of that, what do we do with that? That is why we must come together and negotiate properly, because if it's critical to them, then that value itself must be realized. And I think that is important. Now, having said that, in terms of increasing local content, the first thing I would recommend is legislation. And the legislation is not just passing laws. Laws which gives advantage to African countries. And again, I like to live by example. I had the opportunity to help with the Ghana one. We passed a law which recommends the banning of bauxite exports. The minister has not imposed it yet, but the legislative regime recommends the banning of exports with a certain specific time frame. And then it traces the value chain and to develop an entire integrated value chain. Now I'll come back to the critical. If it's critical, then African governments, and that's why I disagree with the previous speaker on one point, African governments should not be spending money doing the mineral resource estimates and the feasibility. That's very important. Because the moment we spend money doing that, then, sorry, not the mineral resource estimate, the feasibility, then they come back and add it to our debt to GDP ratio and tell us our debt to GDP ratios has crossed 80%, and therefore we are either highly indebted and poor, or we are kicked out of the as it were, the international credit market, etc. If the mineral is critical to private investors, why can't they spend the money doing the feasibility? All that we need to do is to hire experts who benchmark the feasibility. And again, if I experimented this in Ghana, I will go to the last point on local content. We did it with local people. There is this assumption that anytime you talk about local content, it has to be artisanal, some small people who don't have capacity, etc. When we did the international round of solicitation, there were 20 people at the table. The second round, only 7 came. The final base, we received 4. It was a local person who won it, because the statute said the local person must have at least 30% of the component. And this was a 100% local bid. They have done the MRE, finished the feasibility stage. Pure local money. If people are stealing all that money, taking it abroad, why can't they bring some back and put in the feasibility? Africans are not as poor as we let them. We make it seem. There are several ways we can actually improve local content, even from the high end. And then we trace the value chain, and then we tell those people who are artisanal to do the supply contracts, etc., etc. I'm not saying we don't want foreign investors, but the fastest way to attract foreign investors is to develop local investors. Yeah. Without that, we cannot attract foreign investors in a leverage manner. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been given a warning on time, so I'm going to try and see how we start to conclude. Dr. Oliver, on local content, I know you probably have something to add. I will give you that, just a few minutes also around, the focus. Is it ownership of resources? Is it technology transfer, capacity building? Dr. David has also raised some very important issues around, building that capacity locally. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think David is sort of almost exhausted, but I'll just add a few issues around the same local content. I think I continue to go back to industrialization. It's a tool of industrialization. You use that to develop local industry, local capacity. It's very, very important. I mean, we are not saying, because there is the infant industry argument that is used in economics about, we are supporting maybe infant industry and let it grow. Yes, up to a certain point. But it's about efficiency, ensuring that the industry that we are supporting matures. I want to go back to the Brazilian experience, where there are clear metrics, there are clear measurements of really what is local. I learned yesterday, right? The 3 levels of local. Is it local, regional? Is it local at country level? Is it local within the country? Yeah. So I think it's important that we we look at that seriously. And of course, David mentioned the importance of a policy framework, the importance of legal and regulatory framework that ensures that those metrics that you define to say this is local content, allowing it also to graduate. For example, if you look at the mining sector value chain, you say from exploration, mine development, processing, and you get to marketing. Can you graduate your local content requirements, you know? If, for example, this is mining, we might not have the skills, maybe we allow you to bring in experts. But as you mature along the value chain, let our requirements for expertise also increase, local expertise also increase. Because what we are asking you is to say, you are an investor, you have seen our weakness, we don't have capacity. As you develop the resource, as we exploit the resource, develop our people. So you make the local content requirements gradually increasing. You know, say the more we move up the value chain, the more we also have to have people, our own people,
Yes.
being part of this.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think it's very, very important. It's about everything. It's about ownership of the resource.
Yeah.
It's about skills and our active participation along the value chain. It's about communities being part of the supply chain. I like it when my brother says, okay, the artisanal can supply the little things. Yes, it's a start. It's about them graduating. I think we are now talking to programs to develop capacity of suppliers.
Yeah.
Supplier development programs that are legit and covered at law to ensure that we insist on the mining companies to support such initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we'll end with the last theme in this discussion, and I'd like that as we feed into that discussion, maybe you'd also share just, before we open up for the discussion, for questions, the issues around, I know it came up at the beginning around collaboration, regional partnerships and integration and all that. Providence, maybe you could speak to, that the AFCFTA, for those who may not know, you could expand on it a little bit. But then there is an issue around collaboration. And all these things that we're talking about, they may be easy at national level and in country, but then how do we speak with one voice? I think one of the panelists, I think if it was Titus or someone else had said something about all the countries really speaking with one voice. So how can countries leverage around that tool and then building an integrated, value chain for energy transition technologies, but really speaking to what we've been discussing, the importance of regional integration and collaboration. Yeah.
Thanks again, Neri, for throwing that question to me. ACFTA presents a continental-wide market opportunity, not only for minerals, but for all the products produced. It's first time in the history of this continent that we have got a framework that can bring us together as one to trade with each other. So one way that we can contribute to the global, because as much we are working under the CFTA, we are part of the global. So as SFTA, first we need to ensure that we have a collective bargaining power through working together as regional bloc, ECOWAS, COMESA, ESA, SADC, UMA, IGAD. How about we come together to represent our countries when we are engaging with the outside world? So I feel it is something that has been lacking, the intercoordination between the different African Union regional economic bloc to have a unified voice when addressing issues affecting the continent. What we have seen is that when countries like my colleague said, say Zimbabwe or Malawi, go to negotiate with a buyer as Zimbabwe and Malawi, they will not. But if we go as a continent through our different regional economic blocks, we will have a say. We will also say, no, you want gold from us, A, B, C, D. This is what you need to do for our community. This is what the type of technology we are looking that you bring. This is the incentive that we are putting outside there. Second, this will help us negotiate better trade terms and ensure fair pricing. Reason why we don't benefit from our minerals is that the terms of the contracts are not, we are not the one. We are not the expert in that area. The buyer comes with his own terms of trade, and the price are determined at the London Exchange. Who's there? Who's representing Africa? Even at the WTO, those who have attended the WTO, we go as individuals. We never went as a continent. That's why the standards they are putting in place are not favorable to us. That's why it's very hard for our SME to access market, because we are not going there as one voice. We go there as individual. We need to form strategic alliance. If Brazil is doing well in this sector, why can we not have this South-to-South cooperation? The African continent, negotiating with our fellow citizens of this world on the other part, either Asia or why do we have everything have to go to be done in Geneva? We need to also engage in what we call multilateral diplomacy to be able to influence global policies. As a continent, individually, we'll never succeed. That's why I think it was a year ago when we have the US-America Business Forum. Why one country have to invite all our president? Seriously, it was very embarrassing as an African when the Cameroonian president could not even relate, because he was like, why am I here? Who am I talking to? So sometimes we even put pressure on our politician on things like, this was a business forum. I expected the African Union to take the lead in collaboration with Rex. That's what have been failing us. So through ACFTA again, we can work together to reduce trade barriers, which is really a big issue. Why I can't get my cocoa from here to Rwanda or to Zambia? It's trade barriers. Look at the cost of us coming here. Thanks ACP for sponsoring us. If I had to pay, I look at the cost and I look, and I had to spend 8 hours flight, and including 4 or 6 hours in transit. Those are trade barriers. Why can we not work together to harmonize our policies, our standards, our customs? Why is it very hard to move one good from one country to another? Facilitating movement of goods and the people. I was lucky when I was the immigration after arriving at 4 a.m. No one asked me where I'm going to stay. They stamped my passport. But another colleague of mine had to pay visa fee. Do we really need as African to pay visa fee to come, to attend a meeting, to share knowledge, to bring? So how will we go to trade if we still have those barriers? So lastly, on this point about ACFTA, through this platform, we need to work together to build an integrated regional value chain. I will end here. We all use Boeing planes. Do you know Boeing parts are manufactured in more than 32 countries in Europe and around the world, each country focusing on a specific part of the plane. So if a company, Boeing is based in Seattle in the US, can manage to manage the supply chain dealing with 32 countries, African we are 54, can we not create our own Boeing? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Providence. You have sparked something, I think, in the audience. And if my panelists can indulge me a bit because of time, I'd like to open it up, and then maybe you can respond. You wanted to say something, Dr. David, very briefly, and then I'll go to the audience.
Just on AFCFTA,
yes.
There are fundamentals we need to deal with. The AFCFTA relies on rules of origin. And the rules of origin requires that for it to qualify for the tariff, there is a certain amount of local cost built up that should be attained. If you notice, most of the critical minerals and the critical commodities, the countries have not put them in the rules of origin. as commodities to begin with. So I'll come back, but so in Ghana simply, if I sold chocolate in Cote d'Ivoire, made in Ghana, or in Togo, that would be trade. But if I sold cocoa, that would be smuggling. But chocolate comes from cocoa because it's not in the basket of goods. So if you look at the rules of origin, you notice that two critical things have not yet been put in: the automotive industry and clothing. Now, the automotive industry, for example, relies a lot on critical minerals. If you don't include automotive industry in it, then you cannot create an intra-Africa trade in critical minerals. So we would then still be exporting it from our ports and railways to Europe. And we need to be looking at what our countries putting it in the route of origin. Lastly, just for purpose of correction, I cannot leave here without making that correction of my previous. Africa has 55 countries, not 54. Yes, it depends on who is in the room. When Morocco is in the room, they keep saying 54 because of the Western Sahara. But the AU recognizes 55 countries because Morocco left and came back, and the Bahrain Republic was. So it's 55 countries.
All right. Thank you. So my colleague there will pass the mic around. I'm hoping that we can have a few questions as well from the online participants. If we can first get a set of 3. Oh my God, there are more than 3. Okay, the first round of 4, and then we'll come to the panel so that we manage the
I'll
time.
do 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Okay. Good morning.
Please keep the questions brief so we can give an opportunity to everybody.
My name is Harrison Kujo. I work for the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition. Mine is more of a contribution, but I would want to see what Dr. Ofosu-Dorte thinks about it. I'm thinking that for valuation, one of the biggest values Africa could add is leadership and political will. If we have a leadership that is not partisan, that is not corrupt, that is forward-thinking, then we are half of the job done when it comes to adding value to our green minerals. But I also feel that political will is also key. And for us as civil society, one of the best things we can do is to drive political will by going down to the local, so that the people at the so-called bottom can put pressure on our political leaders to move in the right direction. I mean, we are in this room. We don't see a lot of our political leadership here to listen to what we have to say. We have all of the experts here. They are not here to listen to what we have to say. And so it falls on us as civil society to take the message down to our people, galvanize them, and then cause them to put pressure on our political system so that the right decisions are made. I think that these are the two things, the two key values that Africa needs to add so that we can see something positive moving forward. But I want to know what Dr. Ofosu-Dorte thinks about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you have your answer already. Yeah.
Good morning, all. My name is Mahmoud Ibrahim Mahmoud, and I'm here on behalf of APRI, the Africa Policy Research Institute, and I work in the area of methane emission. And I recall last year, as a panelist, I talked about gas flare and methane emission. Now, Dr. Olivia actually talked about the fact that we have delineation issues, exploration and exploitation. Now, most of this is done through geospatial technologies, remote sensing, GIS and all of that. So if remote sensing for mineral discovery and all of that is a basis for the accounting and estimates that we have, why not for the emission detection, measurement, and quantification that we have countries in Africa directly or indirectly denying? Because that is the environmental impact that one of the speakers spoke to, that some blocks across the globe are just interested in taking the resources, but the environmental impact, the core issues that affect our people in terms of that energy transition that we speak about, they are not interested in it. Thank you.
Thank you. My next two, please make it very crisp and short.
Thank you very much. My name is Adungo Ayorkobet, a civil society activist. I'm not sure all these brilliant ideas that have been discussed here are entirely new. For me, before I was born, I know the first Ghanaian president, Kwame Nkrumah, preached the economic gospel of industrialization across the African continent. Today, we are continuing discussions on industrialization, integration, value addition. I just want to know, what is it that all these brilliant ideas have been discussed over and over again, and we are unable to push for that one thing to be able to get the results that are needed? I will appreciate very much if each of these experts here share with us just one strategic action that all of us will go out and push that thing, so that if in 5 years, 10 years, ASAP brings us back here, we will be coming here not to talk about or discuss these brilliant ideas, but to recognize or appreciate and celebrate that we have achieved industrialization and no more discussing or talking about brilliant concepts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, and my name is Daniel Limbo. I'm with Local Governance Network of Ghana. My question is about the value chain, that we are so happy that we can help each other to ensure that at the end we have a clean energy. My worry is the clean energy involves a lot of technology from A to Z along the value chain. Are we in the position to be part of that knowledge of producing those technology ourselves, or we are still going to depend on outsiders? And I'm happy to see a video where Huawei, China company, is in Burkina Faso. And they are technology about mobile computers and all those things are going to be produced in Burkina Faso. And they are going to employ about 5,000 Burkina Faso graduates. I think the factory itself is being set up. Are we not worried that if we are not able to do something like that, we may have to be going to be buying technology from the West to come and improve value addition, and they will dictate the price for us? They will buy it. Are we not worried? Are we looking at that one as we are happy that we are going for clean energy? That is my worry. And we'll come here some few years again and we'll still be talking about these issues. So let's look at all these things along, and then we'll make sure that we identify the risks and the assumptions and all those things, we work on it, and then we can benefit fully from that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Nelly, you take this set and then we'll come back.
Yes, but if you can also allow a lady to ask.
Okay, so there is a lady hand here.
Yes, and then we can get the last question and we'll go to another round.
My name is Judith. I'm a student and I'm here on behalf of myself and my future. My question is, in making sure that we do not allow foreigners to exploit minerals here, whose duty or responsibility is it to make sure that the minerals industries who come here and exploit us, as you said, are taking good care of the places they are doing these things, they are exploiting they are extracting the minerals from? Because you all bear with me that there are so many regions that these things are happening and they don't have good road infrastructure, not to even talk of any infrastructure that would develop the place. So whose responsibility is it to make sure that they don't exploit, but they do the extraction of the minerals and then they develop the community? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So
should we start
yes,
with this round?
Yes, so
okay.
we'll come back.
All right, so there was an industrialization question that was to all of you. So, but there's also a question on value chain. You wanted to respond to that, Dr. Oliver? The question around, there was a comment and question around value chain.
I wanted to speak to industrialization.
Industrialization, okay, then you'll start with that. Then we'll give everybody a chance to speak to industrialization first, okay.
I just want to emphasize, my brother, that that industrialization keeps coming back, demonstrates that it's at the center of our structural transformation. We lost it during the 80s, during the World Bank Washington Consensus. We lost industrialization. We lost economic planning, if you remember. It was a sin to mention economic planning in the 1980s, right? But today we are talking of a developmental state. We've gone back right round. Now we are recognizing and accepting that not everything that comes out of the World Bank is maybe the best. We have seen that maybe we lost our industrialization, but it has come back. It is then important that, because we've got our foot in this industrialization, that we really continue to push it forward. And the value chains are a critical part of the industrialization strategy. Is the linkages, forward, backward, side, I mean, you can name them, that emerge from the further processing of our minerals. When you look at the mineral value chain itself, from exploration to the marketing of your products, I think there is that element of a multiplier effect in terms of jobs for our people, in terms of incomes for our people, in terms of a source of industrial takeoff. So it's important. Industrialization is important. We shouldn't lose that word again, but ensure that we push through the industrialization strategies. I also want to sort of align it with the issue around policy. I think you spoke about, is it Togo, where the Chinese are establishing a factory? I think it's a clear illustration of a deliberate policy to promote that. That's what we are trying to do when we are looking at local content. We are saying local content enables us to bring in our own people to be part of the value chains. And because we have a policy framework that allows us to say, if you are going to set up in Ghana, these are the conditions. You are going to link up with the local company. You are going to bring in such a percentage of labor from outside. You take Ghanaians first, and then maybe 10% from outside. Equipment, such a percentage of equipment. But it's a conscious approach of policy, application of policy, that is going to help us achieve that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In less than a minute as well on industrialization, Dr. Marit, and then we'll go to the others and go back for another round, the last round of questions. Yeah.
Okay, I will address industrialization, but I like the comment on the first point about leadership. And it ties also to the one who knows before he was born. But because it's true, we need Kwame Nkrumah again in the continent. Because seriously, and we have the AMV, we have acknowledged, and Oliver and I know how much it took to come to that framework, to that vision. But then, and the African Continental Free Trade Area, again, that was explained, it's really, everyone celebrated it. But why are we not making headways? That's why we have to ask, why are we not where we want to be, the Africa we want? So it's a complex issue. I don't want to minimize it. It's a complex issue. There are external factors. We have history, legacy, challenges. I was mentioning one that is now we are relegated to somehow Africa exporting raw and then coming back. So it's really takes, it's not just time that it takes deliberate leadership and political will to do that. And I like the Indonesia example. I keep telling it, because they went against the export bans. They went against, everybody was saying they will not succeed. 10 years ago, everybody was bullying Indonesia. I remember, don't go that way, don't do that. But Indonesia has something to show for. Why? Because they had a very dedicated, deliberate policy, and they had a leader that goes with it.
Yeah.
Africa is not all doom and gloom, by the way. I mean, Ghana, you're telling us, is not that good, but we have Botswana. It really is a good example of deliberate leadership that, they took the diamond and they said, we want to value add, and they had their terms with De Beers, and they succeeded. We have other, if you see, it's not all gloom and bloom. I mean, we had in the 15 years that we had the Africa Mining Vision, I'm not saying it's tied to the Africa Mining Vision, but almost all producing with significant mineral endowment countries have policies, they have developed policies that are somewhat aligned to the principles of the Africa Mining Vision. There's a great realization, but we're not there yet. And this is where the implementation gap is. I think political will, dedicated leadership, and we really need to come together. And it's very strange. Again, I'm an African Union. But, I do not see the collaboration among states. And I know my sister from COMESA was talking about the regional economic community. But they're there, but and I like the lady, the last one who asked, whose responsibility is it? It's all of us. We really need to push. Civil society has a big role to play here. I know there is also always an issue with the political space. This is a reality, or policy space.
Yeah.
But we really need your civil society to push your leaders, because you are the ones who are, who are our mouth, so to speak, so that, we push the agendas that are at the highest level.
Thank you. Titus, and then Providence, and Dr. David.
So a couple of issues. It's actually a question that a lot of us are seized with. Why is it that we have not implemented policies that are good for us? And there's a couple of issues. It's ideas and it's ideology. I think Doc spoke about what happened. You remember 1981 Lagos Plan of Action. It was a product of ministries of economic planning. And then after that, we had the Berg Report, which was really produced after central bank governors and ministers of finance were consulted. So you will notice that in the last 40 years, our ideas have evolved in a way that had a different view of what the role of the state should be, the role of the private sector should be, and I think we were wrong. And the software that is really wiring a lot of our leaders, particularly those who are Minister of Finance and Minister of Industry, is they look African, but they are not African. And so sometimes when you look at the average Minister of Finance, I want you to do this homework. Where did they work? Where were they educated? In almost every situation, they are former IMF and World Bank. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm saying they are wired in a certain way in terms of their philosophy and ideology. They almost don't believe the state can actually do anything good, but China, the US done that. So I think we have a software, ideological and philosophical problem on the continent. And of course, we've got interest, both internal and external. Remember, some of us call ourselves the Lusophone. We are Portuguese first and African. Some are more French than the Parisians themselves, and others are more British than the British. And so what it has meant is Africans and African countries belong to AU, but they also belong to a spaghetti bowl of global initiatives that sometimes are economically divergent. And so when you then sit down and say, let's have an AFCFTA, they sign off, and then let's have some bilateral agreement that contradicts what AFCFTA, they also sign off. And what it does is you only need to have an external interest working with local proxies who are paid through fellowships at Harvard or Tsinghua University, and then they will sell off the whole country to a piece of cake. And so interests are also an important element. And of course, idiocy. And I think we underestimate the power of idiocy in policy making, where leaders make idiotic or corrupt decisions that cannot be justified or defended in any way. They just, and we could run through contracts, we could run through agreements, and you're like, there is no way. He knows what he's supposed to sign, but he didn't. It is idiotic. And then lastly, I think it's important to talk about the power of asymmetry, which is power and information asymmetry. I don't want to bog down on Malawi, but let me go say to Mozambique. What is the GDP of Mozambique? Perhaps 22 billion. Mozambique is negotiating with $200 billion companies. I want you to think about the information and power asymmetry there. a $20 billion GDP economy versus a $200 billion country. And so what I do think is, sometimes we think it's political will or lack of political will. You know, we've tended to, anything we don't understand politically, a phenomenon it lacks political will. And I think sometimes it's not so much political will as it is power and information asymmetry between small states and big states that are selfish and of every sectarian interest. And where I think we can bridge this power asymmetry is the power through civil society, multi-track diplomacy. Let's expose unfair and abusive relationship between states and some multinational corporations that are so abusive. When you look at some of the grants that have been signed in DRC or in Mozambique or in Central African Republic, I think we cannot just expect that government to fight alone. We need civil society, we need other countries, we need AU to bridge the gap between asymmetries. And so the multi-track diplomacy, which is the state, I also think of diplomacy at the think tank, people to people, civil society. We have to start doing better. You will be surprised how we don't know Zimbabwe when we are Ghanaians, how we don't know Kenya when we are Nigerians. The assumption that that's going to translate somehow into collaboration when we don't know that, I think that's going to be a problem. Yeah. So that multi-track diplomacy is going to be important. And I'm inspired by the fact that all of you seated here, if you look at your earrings or your necklaces, it probably is the map of Africa, isn't it? I saw at the reception, right, that there is a map of Africa being sold. What does it tell me? There are songs about Africa, Alpha Blondy, even Ndombolo has African songs. At the intuitive level, there is a love I don't want to call it infatuation, but there's something about every one of us that appreciates or loves the idea of Africa. What I do think is smart political analysts and policymakers need to find a way of harvesting that sort of intuitive love for Africa into a programmable program of action around regional integration. We have to stop singing about Africa, we have to stop singing, making art about Africa, and start acting as an integrated political force. That is Africa.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Titus Providence and Dr. David last.
Yes.
Yeah.
For me, why we are where we are, it's us.
Yeah.
We thought we can't, and we believe we can't. We have borders which were put in place which we didn't contribute to. If we want change, it starts with me, it starts with you. This is my land, Africa. This is your land, Africa. The moment I change the way I think, the way I see things, I'll start reaching to Titus, to David, and say, brothers, let's talk. It doesn't matter you are Yoruba, Rwandese, Maasai, or Zulus. We are all Africans. So we need, first, to look at who we are, understand who we are, and where we want to go. There are so many beautiful policies on this continent, so many strategies that has been written that are in our shelves. Who have read the Africa 2063? How many? Not even 10 in this room. So if we don't know Africa we want, how are you going to develop a policy or implement something you don't know? Leading is what kills this continent. Someone else will fly all the way from DC to tell me how to develop a value chain in Africa. Because I don't read. So let's empower our people. Let's read. Let's take ownership. Let's hold our leaders accountable. We vote, we dance behind them. Once they are voted, no one ever question why they are not implementing whatever they have promised. And because of that, we don't even invest. How many of us have invested in any African business? Your aunties, brothers, cousins, doing chapatis or doing donuts. Put some money. What we do, we see Indian coming. If you check, they borrow money from family. That's why the Indian economy is growing. That's why they are very powerful diaspora. Indian will live in an Indian house, eat from an Indian supermarket, wear an Indian wear, borrow money from Indian. Africa, get money, the first shopping is in Paris.
Woolworth.
So how do you expect you to develop your industry when you are not even the consumers? Look at the tea, at tea break. How many of that is Ghanaian tea we are drinking here?
Yeah.
So we are the enemy of our own. We are not the promoter of ourselves. So We are accountable, and we have to hold accountable each one of us if we are to develop. And we will have to do it through civil society, through private sector, and as we are working for the government, we have to hold each other's, otherwise we will not industrialize, come back here next year, 10 years here, we speak the same thing, but go back, educate ourselves, be proud for being an African, be proud of who we are, and talk, preach the gospel, like what Jesus asked the 12 disciples to do. Go and preach the gospel. And at the end, we shall reach where we want to go. Thank you.
Conclusion. Thank you. Yes, Dr. David.
Yeah, so on industrialization, I think one of the speakers talked about Kwame Nkrumah earlier. Incidentally, Ghana was very much on the path of industrialization before. In the 60s, we used to manufacture cars here. And I mean manufacture, not assemble. Yes, that's a fact. All the way, I mean, I was very a kid, but up to the 70s, there were cars like Adom, Wafu, those cars that used to take light freight, which were all manufactured here. And there was a whole place in Kumasi called Magazine where engines were put together here. But we had this habit of, as soon as we change a government, then everything about it is bad. So we cannot pick, okay, there were the bad things some people did, but what are the good things that we can leverage and continue? After all, we talk about European Union today. European Union really was the European Steel Commission of private sector people who came together and changed this whole into a European Union. They constantly improve on what it is that, so that's one of the things we need to learn. And that's the first thing I want to talk about regarding industrialization. The other thing is that we need to contextualize it to our environment. African governments are not spending on R&D. If we don't spend on research and development, we will not look at things which are very simple related to us. I mean, my colleague talked about a gold necklace and the rest not being bought here. If we stimulate the market, they will get it wrong initially, but gradually. And once we have a market, you realize that those foreign investors may want to, I mean, locate and collaborate with domestic investors. As for our leaders, the less said about them, the better. My brother has used the word idiocy. I don't want to use the other part of that word, so I'll leave it for now. But having said that, we need to have pressure from the ordinary masses, and they are in this room, and to put pressure on them, because I'll just give you the example of Indonesia. Indonesia moved in the last 10 years into the G20. You know, one single most important factor that did that, not a critical mineral, iron ore. Nobody is mentioning iron ore as critical mineral here. They simply banned the export of iron ore, and it added $2 billion in 5 years to their economy. Then suddenly, Elon Musk's lithium is going to Indonesia. They have to be bold decision makers who decide that there are certain things that we will not do. Lastly, our people need to stop thinking about it now. I said it before and I want to. Ghana, as an example, has got a legislative instrument called LI 1547, which is on technology transfer. If you read the LI, it is required that the foreign investors invest here, they will transfer technology over a period. I'll go back to Kwame Nkrumah again, I'll come back to the current. When the Akosombo Dam, which was the largest man-made lake in the world, it's now the third largest, right? Generating hydro, which is renewable, was built. The foreigners were required to transfer the technology in 3 years. And Ghana has managed that dam since that time. Indeed, at a point, that dam was ranked the best managed hydro dam in the world, next to only one in California. And many people don't know that for many years, the VRA was the one guaranteeing Ghana when Ghana borrowed money, not the other way around. But we mismanage as always. Why is this important? Because when I come to the technology transfer law, instead of now allowing it to transfer technology, we see it as a money-making venture for now. So investors come, and even those who are doing ordinary electronic platforms are supposed to be having technology, and then they pay money. And the regulators are all interested in the money received into the budget for now consumption, not the technology transferred. So I think there is a lot we as intellectuals have to do about the way our leaders think. As to how to describe them, I think my colleague has already described them adequately.
Thank you. Thank you. We are coming to the close. We've been allowed just 3 questions, only 3. I don't know. Only 3 questions. One lady in that set of questions. There is a lady the other side. I see the gentleman in orange. I think you had a hand up before, in the last round. Oh, I was getting some help from Mabel, but now they have left me to struggle. So that's one, the gentleman in the orange shirt, and then the lady in black on this side. I'll just allow one more question this side, very briefly. Otherwise, we are in between your break as well.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I actually raised my hand earlier. I'm glad you have seen that and you didn't recognize me.
Now you're taking your time.
Yes.
So please ask the question.
I listened to all the beautiful presentation and comments. Even the experts have spoken. Now, a gentleman up there made a categorical point about holding the power to account. Lack of political will and others have been our major problem. That's why we keep going in and coming back all the time. And he was seeking a direct solution to the problem. Nearby, a gentleman here also said something about, okay, so nearby, a gentleman also makes some vivid explanation, saying that we shouldn't be going and coming back again, that experts should say something. Well, I thought the experts are going to say what I'm going to say because they are not in my mind. So this is my small mind. Now, we are in an election year. This particular conference is a step in the right direction. Political parties are being taken on to sign pact. And I believe by these 3 whole day conference, we should also hold the politicians accountable. Let them sign some sort of pact. It is something that we all need to look at. Since the expert couldn't say this, I thought that we should look at this at the end of the whole conference. Let them hold the politicians accountable. Let them sign a pact, sort of, that these things that we are saying over there will be captured in their manifesto, because this is another election year, and they are here giving us promises. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's the point is taken. The gentleman there right next to you, Mabel, in a minute, straight to the point, and then I go to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Kanakuya Edwin Kavuma from Uganda, Ministry of Finance. My question is about the AMV, and maybe Dr. Marit could answer. We have agreed, one of the takeaways we are taking is that we encourage our governments to ratify the AMV, and we have agreed about that. But when you look at the year 2009, sometimes when you say this policy or this document was agreed in 2009, they will say, is it still relevant? So my question is there an assessment that has been done to make sure that it is still relevant, considering the current issues on energy transition, climate change, so that we can refer to a more recent formal document to push this drive. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now we go to the lady in the corner there. Please stand up, we'll get your question, then I'll get, I can't see this side. There was a question here on this side. Oh, yes.
Thank you. So my question is to Dr. Marit, and already, a lot has been said about the importance of policies and regulations. And so my question is, so for the Africa, develop the strategy that we are developing for the green and critical minerals, is it promising to bridge, the gap and also address the issues of African countries working independently, negotiating on their own? And if so, for example, how is that contributing to Ghana's green mineral strategy that we are developing? And how is Ghana's, strategy also contributing to that process? Thank you.
All right, so 2 questions to Dr. Marit. I will take the last 2 here. The 2 gentlemen here, please stand up very briefly. Where's the mic? I can't see very, okay. So I think this will be the last set, unfortunately. Otherwise, time has gone, completely gone.
All right.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kabayo Mohao from Zambia. It's just a reaction from the panel. The first thing we should tell is, like Dr. David said, I think we don't know our value. So what are we doing as a continent to map these minerals? Because without knowing what's on the ground, we will not be able to know what we have. For example, we've got countries which go to IMF, we beg $100 million, but we've got minerals like sojilite, 20 tons is $120 million, but we're not doing that. So what policy is African Union going to push so that Africans can put monies aside for area review? I know like our country, Zambia, has never done that before. Even our copper belt, which has got copper, was not mapped up to Lusaka. It's only now, when last month, I think, a company from the UK has been contracted to do the area views of the whole country, which I hope the rest of Africa can still do. Then the second thing I want to talk about is, in terms of bargaining power, do we really know what we want? Because what I've seen is most of the time, when this bargaining is done, the conditions, like I've always said, are always against us. I think I'm impressed with Uganda in terms of what the president has done there, where he refused to export uranium for power to Europe to say, we can also use it. Because of uranium, the way it is, like, you can generate more power from it, and it's always clean energy, but we're not using that as well. So if we can put such policies and also know what is worth, what is ours, then it will be better.
In conclusion?
In conclusion,
yeah.
Africa is always cheaper to produce these things. We've done the research. I think the feasibility study for producing minerals, batteries in Zambia has been done. It's cheaper by 3.5 tons to manufacture electric batteries in Zambia, and it's 2.5 tons cheaper to produce them in Zambia than in China. But what are we going to do about it, the whole of Africa? Because if we're going to look at it as one country, Ghana, Zimbabwe, it's always a fragmented market. So the only way to go is looking at it as one market as Africa, and we continue on it, on the gains, on the FTA, then we develop more from that. So my plea is to our African Union, to the COMESA, to all ECOWAS and the rest, to work together to integrate and have solutions with a continental policy, bring it down to the ground so that the person in the village can benefit. You find they're not benefiting much happening from this. Otherwise, that's in conclusion. Thanks.
Thank you. Very last question. I think the panelists are still around, so people can engage them on some of the questions they had after.
Thank you very much. My name is MacDonald Chilepa. I've just come to Ghana for the first time. I'm from Zambia. That's southeast of Ghana as a neighbor. My proposition is that I also see the need for an African policy in everything, whether it's transition, whether it's capacity building. But there's one issue that I've coined recently. We talk about resources. I wish we could also add what is called youth infrastructure. This is actually the new resource. I heard one lady who's asking who's going to speak for them. What we've done in Zambia is we've created what is called university chapters. This is to galvanize the youth. So no one should question whether as Africa we have the capacity. We're talking about issues that will happen 30 years from now. Who are going to be there? It was the youth. So in everything that we need to do, and this is an asset for Africa, it is the youth asset, youth infrastructure. You're talking about energy as a resource, but youth is the biggest resource. I rest my case.
Thank you. We are standing between your lunch, or rather your break, and so many other programs lined up for that day. So I'm going to end here the questions. Please feel free during the break to reach out to the panelists. I'm going to ask that for those that were directly, I think specifically to Dr. Marit, but I think there was something about, there's a question that came up, I think, around industrialization. But anyway, I think as you respond to those, Dr. Marit, you can also share your closing remarks, and we'll go to all the panelists as well for their closing remarks. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There was one very specific about the relevance of the Africa Mining Vision currently after 15 years. That's a very good question, and I'm glad you're asking, because we are just doing an assessment and an evaluation of the AMV, and we are updating it. We have a meeting in Addis Ababa on 12 and 13 September just to do that. We have done some interviews and everything from all stakeholders, Ghana included, and now we are updating it. So yes, we are on track, and I'm glad you asked, because I'm happy to talk about that. About the Africa Green Mineral Strategy, and if it considers negotiation, the question was that. The Green Mineral Strategy is overarching. It talks about the whole value chain. It talks about the exploration, and I come back to the geological later on. It talks about how to value add, how to use, make sure that you are value adding and skills and technology, and also environmental and social implications. So it's all encompassing. The honest, we advocate in the AMV in general, we advocate no contracts. We want the law to be the law of the land. You don't negotiate contracts in Canada. You just go with the law. But in Africa, we have to have contracts for each, which is not what the aim is. But the reality is we do have we have to negotiate contracts, and then these really, and to the point of bargaining power and the asymmetry of information, we really have to make sure that when you negotiate, it's not the mining, the minerals. We have to have experts. On their side, they come with a high-level expert. They know about modeling. They know about economic implication. They know about everything. They have the data. But on our side, do we know what we are bargaining for? So we have the Africa Legal Support Facility in the African Development Bank has a facility where you can actually ask them to come to the table, and they have all the knowledge and the expertise to negotiate on behalf. So I think it's one of those. So the Africa Green Mineral Strategy proposes all that, but in the actual terms, and when it comes to countries, it's really the onus is on the countries to negotiate the better terms, and to know that you have to know all the realities about the modeling, what it takes, and of course, and I come to the question about, do we know what we have? In the Africa Mineral Development Center, we have a whole dedicated section on geological and mineral information system. We have, I'm glad the CEO of the Chambers of Mines today mentioned the AMREC, the African Regional Resources Classification, which tries to overcome JOC as valuation of our mineral resources. We have criteria that are different from JOC. We have included value addition in there, but also social and environmental implications. So basically, yes, it needs a lot of technology. It needs a lot, you need drones. You have new technologies now to assess what you have on the ground. And we need joint ventures for that. We can't say that we know we can do all of this on our own, but we have to be very strategic. Again, like I keep mentioning, and I'm glad you mentioned the Zambia feasibility study and all of this. We have to really be clear that we have our own strategy. When you have a strategy, when you have a roadmap, you don't get distracted by external forces that might have other interests. And you have to be very careful about that because it's there. And on the youth, I really, really agree. Africa Union has a youth dedicated women and youth, and we didn't talk much about women today, but women are also a big force that we really need to take into account, but also youth. I was really, really happy that, you know, this conference is having innovation with youth. It's really empowering. It's really to see them having ideas, marketing them, and that's where we should go. And I agree with you that we should use the youth more efficiently.
Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Oliver, and then we'll go down the line.
Thank you. I just want to, my takeaway is there is power in regional integration. There is power in collaboration. I think Zambia and the DRC on their project, on the battery initiative, they are demonstrating that there is that power, working together, creating a harmonized environment. And also another issue that they are demonstrating, that politics is also very important because the project is being dealt with at a very high political level, and hence its movement through is quite smooth. So as member states, I think it's about working together. How do we tackle the dynamic geopolitics? How do we tackle China, the EU, the US, as they come in for our resources? There is need for collaboration, need for creating a harmonized environment, not compete against each other. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will end on a Latin note, not that I'm Latin. It says Festina Lente. I don't know if some of you may be familiar with it, which means hurry slowly. And so the essence of that is, I think, there is no time for us to keep deliberating and dithering, and yet we have to be very deliberate. By the time we wake up about batteries and lithium, maybe it will be sodium, like what you said. So there has to be a sense of urgency in our policymakers. But as we are grabbed with the sense of urgency, we have to be very deliberate, very methodical, very careful, and consultative with different arms. The final point for me is the state has to be competent. The state has to be entrepreneurial. The state has to be developmental and know how to leverage and work with its own private sector and invest. Nobody is going to save us. We have to do this ourselves, our states, and we have to do that in partnership with our private sector and domestic capital markets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. For me, what I would say as we conclude is that we need to collaborate and work together as a continent. This is an opportunity we have, that we have this rich mineral across the continent. So we have got nice framework such as ACFTA, the Africa Mining Vision, different regional policies on industrialization, investment promotion. It's high time that we collaborate beyond the talks we do in different meetings at the AUC. That's one. With that collaboration, we'll still be here 10 years. Second, we need to educate and empower ourselves. As David said, very little of our government invest in research and development. That's where we get technology, that's where innovation comes. With that, as investing in our own education to understand the issue, to know what we are talking when we go to the global stage, the more illiterate we be in terms of the business we are doing, we cannot have a say. Lastly, we need to move this barrier called visas. We cannot trade when we cannot move things from one place to another. Even if we do everything we have discussed in the past 2 days here. But there's that barrier that I need to go to Ghana, I need a visa to enter. I would rather trade with another country which doesn't require me visa. And if you notice, all our cooperating partners from the developed world, they enter our country visa-free or visa on arrival. Why can we not at least start adapting that? With that barrier in our head, we still not cooperate. And you go back to my first point that collaboration is key. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, finally, Dr. David.
So 3 quick things. The first one, I think maybe the 2 speakers, they didn't quite get the answer. I think a couple of people on the panel gave the answer. And I gave the answer too. I want to repeat. The question is how we keep saying these things, what can we do to ensure it is done? I did emphasize that some of us gave up on our leaders long ago, apart from a few. The real thing will be done if all of us here keep putting pressure on them, and that's why I like events like this. I'm going to make a statement, maybe you can go with that. Africa will not be led from the front, it will be pushed from the back. Unless those of us can push those people at the front, they are not going to do it. So that's the charge to all of us. The second point has to do with the lofty things like Africa Mining Vision, etc. Nice documents, but it's like anything coming out of the AU. Until we push it, they are not going to do it. Yes, and I've seen many of them. I've been involved in a lot of AU stuff. Until we push them, they will sign these things to just check the box. Anyone who doesn't put his money where his mouth is not serious. And I will use the AFCFTA as an example. The last time I checked, and I've been very much involved in AFCFTA, the last time I checked, out of a budget of $22 million, only $450,000 came from African countries. That's on the average $8,000 per country. So we are not putting money in. The funding is coming from AFDB, AfriExim, EU, etc. If the EU is funding your AFCFTA strategy, like seriously, you will be exporting to the EU. So we need to push them to put their money where their mouth is so that we know that African Mining Strategy is an excellent document, but I am not looking for actually the heads of state to be signing. No, I'm not looking forward to that at all. Actually, when I see it on TV, I won't watch. I'll tell you what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the likes of the ASEP and other to create an index where we tell African countries that on the African Mining Index that you have adopted, you are at 0 on a scale of 1 to 10. This country is at 9. Our leaders only react when they are ranked and they realize they are not doing well on the ranking.
That's true.
That's what we should do. Lastly, it's a personal campaign, and I tweet about it. Africa at the front. We have to integrate at the AU passport, the African passport, is being a protocol. Nobody is doing it. You know how we are going to do it? I stopped calling myself a Ghanaian. I call myself an African from Ghana. And I'm happy all the Zambians and others say they are Africans, they are coming from Zambia. Stop calling yourself an African, a Zambian. You are an African from Zambia, an African from Nigeria. That way, we will integrate at this level, and our leaders will listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you. What a better way to conclude our remarks. Can we give a round of applause to the panel? Those hands are mine. So now let's give to the panel, please, and appreciate them. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Nelly. Please, let's appreciate them once more. Our panelists will take a picture in front here, and then I hope the camera people are ready. Please, let's keep appreciating them while they take the picture.
I'm an African from Ghana, African from Zambia, African from Kenya, African from everywhere, African from Ghana, African from Kenya, African from Zambia. This is the way to work it out.
Thank you very
There
much.
are times to know.
Thank you very much. So, like I promised yesterday, we are going to be eating very often today. So we are due for a snack break, and then after the snack break, we'll have our final set of side events. And after our side events, we'll have lunch, and then after lunch, we'll come back here for the closing plenary. But before we leave, one important piece of activity: the top 3 finalists in our Innovation Challenge, KPMG, in quote, has just delivered it to us. So I invite the judge to come and announce, Mr. Caballo, to come and announce the top 3 finalists for us.
Thank you, ASEP. I want to again congratulate the initiative. This is very important. I think most of the times when we attend these events, I think it has been echoed by everyone here, that we always talk and we go back. But instead of just talking, ASEP is showing us we need to be practical by having this innovation challenge. Otherwise, we're happy to be here. And first of all, this is one of the things which are going to help us as Africa to come out of the unemployment, which we have, the high levels of unemployment, as well as the wealth which we need to create to emancipate ourselves economically for ourselves. So it's only through these solutions that we're going to find from ourselves that are going to help our communities. Because our own challenges, it's only us who live in the communities and we know what it is. And I'm happy that these individuals, to everyone who participated in this challenge, and to the judges, to my fellow judges, I want to thank you for finding time and to advocate on this. So the top 3 initiatives, the first one is Oosu, Bempa, and it was Smart Biogas. Let's give them a round of applause again. So these are the top 3. They are not being given as the first, the second, or the last, the third, and they're just being in the top 3. The second one is Jonko Jamao, under plastic to gas. Let's give another round of applause to Jonko Jamao, the plastic to gas. Then the third one and the final one in the basket is Aisheti Abdul Razak. We are happy that we continue to balance the gender. Let's give a clap to them again.
Great. Thank you very much. So these are our 3 finalists. They want to take more pictures of you, so center yourself. Our 3 finalists, they will come back here at the closing plenary for the final battle for who walks away with $1,000 mentorship support and all forms of support that we can give them. Please, let's appreciate them once more. You can take your seats. You can take your seats now. Our side events are starting at 1. 1 and will end at 1:30. I promised you, those who were here in the morning, that we'll have lunch at 1:30. We are still on time, so we'll use the next 20 minutes to have our snack and health break, and then we'll reconvene. Now let me show you. We are going to divide this place into 3, 2 parts behind and 1 here, right? So our first session, side event, optimizing revenue mobilization from Africa's quarry subsector, lessons from Ghana, hosted by Oxfam, NORAD, and ASEP, will be here. The first half of the room that you can access from the side doors. Africa Lithium Strategies and ETH NADEL and LNRGI alumni event, which is hosted by ETH and NADEL, will be on either side, so you enter from the side at the back. And then we have Unlocking Africa's Wealth, the Path to Mineral Value Addition and Beneficiation, hosted by Global Witness, also the second half at the back. Then in the foyer, we are going to have Promoting Women Participation in Africa's Extractive Value Chain, hosted by ASEP and Women in Mining Ghana. So the entrance that we have there, that is where the 4th session will, by the time you come back from snack, that place will be set up. So we are entering all of these spaces from the sides and not the front. I hope that is clear, because we are going to have another session in the foyer. Okay, please, now we can take our break and have our snack break. We start our side events at 1 o'clock.
phase out. They say phase out. Enjoy your day. Celebrate your day. With all understanding. No, yeah, let it be so. Good to see you walking with your boss. Oh yeah, that's true. I wish I would catch his attention. Oh yeah. Enjoy your day. My brother, enjoy your water. Enjoy your day. Call it jazzy music. The sound is already programmed in the floor. Tell you this, oh yes. I'm an African from Ghana. I'm an African from Ethiopia. I'm an African from Ghana. Oh, 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 yeah. Even the interpreter, even the cameraman, even my brother right away. Celebrate Africa. Mr. Ben Boachi is a man from Africa. He's an African from Ghana. Well, the president of ASEP is an African from Ghana. Oh, Dr. Ben, he's an African from Ghana. Celebrate a lovely day in Africa. Oh, 0244 380 0244 380 107 is my number. Oh yeah. Call me anytime, my name is Ken. Ken MC. Anytime, any day in your life. Enjoy your day. Oh, I'm an African from Ghana. You never broke my barrier. You never broke the chains. You never told me nothing on your mind, rocking. 'Cause I saw you right on the corridors talking about you. Let's talk about nobody but you. Oh, there would be someone on the side. You can say you don't mind. Don't you complain. Don't you complain. The only way I've got with you. When we get together on a day like this, oh, what a feeling.